Here we go. How about now? Can you hear me now? There we go. There we go. My mistake. My mistake, folks. I just realized what was going on. Hold on. Hold on. It should be... All right, we can hear? Perfect, perfect. To everybody on Twitch here, thank you guys for hopping in. Everybody in here, I appreciate you so very much because in Twitch, I don't get nearly as many watchers. So anyone on YouTube who happens to have a Twitch account also, highly appreciate it if you guys could hop over there as well. Twitch, YouTube, let me know in the chat here. Is it too loud right now? Is the background music too loud? Give me some ones if the music is too loud. Give me some two if the background music is all right. All right, perfect, perfect. It's looking like the background music's doing all right. All righty, folks. Are we ready to read some Jurassic Park? All right, and we'll do some discussions about the book too as we go along. So, without further ado, we can hop right into this. Give me just a second here. I will be trying to watch both the Twitch and the YouTube chat if I can, just so that way I'm not missing anybody out here. Masked Man, thanks for joining us on Twitch, much appreciated. Oh, hold on a second here. All right, folks, we're going to be starting off right away at the beginning. And to add a little bit of extra ambiance as the night goes on and as it gets a little darker, we're going to turn the light on down here and give ourselves a bit of a better view. Dr. Nightmare, thanks for the follow on here on Twitch. Much appreciated, much appreciated. Alrighty, let's get this started. The tropical rain fell in drenching sheets, hammering the corrugated roof of the clinic building, roaring down the metal gunder. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that, folks. Maskman, Red Star, thank you guys all for following. Deadshot, wow, a lot of folks following here on Twitch right now. Much appreciated. All right. Let's get this going here. The tropical... Sorry, folks. Do not mean to be stuttering so much. There's just a lot going on. And I'm going to get a little closer to the book as well so I can read it a little better. The tropical rain fell in drenching sheets, hammering the corrugated roof of the clinic building, roaring down the metal gutters and splashing onto the ground in a torrent. Roberta Carter sighed and stared out the window. From the clinic, she could hardly see the beach at the ocean beyond, cloaked in a low fog. This wasn't what she had expected when she had come to the fishing village of Bahia Nasco on the west coast of Costa Rica. To spend 2 months visiting as a physician. Bobby Carter had expected sun and relaxation after 2 grueling years of residency in emergency medicine at Michael Crichton in Chicago. She had been in Bahia Nasco now for 3 weeks, and it had rained every day. Everything else was fine. She liked the isolation of Bahia Nasco and the friendliness of its people. Costa Rica had one of the 20 best medical systems in the world, and even in this remote country village, the clinic was well maintained and amply supplied. Her paramedic, Manuel Aragon, was intelligent and well trained. Bobby was able to practice a level of medicine equal to what she had practiced in Chicago. Taking a pause here and a little side note, I'd like to mention that that's something that is very commonly misconstrued for people, that folks in other places don't really have, what's the word for it? Great medical care. Other countries do have fantastic medical care. Like, you genuinely be surprised at how good it can be. So I don't know where this like misconception comes from, but a lot of like what's considered third world countries still have great medical coverage and care. Getting back into it. But the rain, the constant, unending rain. Across the examining room, Manuel cocked his head. "Listen," he said. "Believe me, I hear it," Bobby replied. "No, listen." And then she caught it. Another sound blended with the rain. A deeper rumble that built and emerged until it was clear. The rhythmic thumping of a helicopter. She thought, they can't be flying in weather like this. But the sound built steadily, and then the helicopter burst through the ocean fog and roared overhead, circled, and came back. She thought she saw the helicopter swing over the water near the fishing boats, then ease sideways to the rickety wooden dock and back toward the beach. It was looking for a place to land. It was a big-bellied Sikorsky with a blue stripe on the side with the words InGen Construction. That was the name of the construction company building a new resort on one of the offshore islands. The resort was said to be spectacular and very complicated. Many of the local people were employed in the construction, which had been going on for more than 2 years now. Bobby could imagine it. One of those huge American resorts with swimming pools and tennis courts where guests could play and drink their daiquiris without having any contact with the real life of the country. Casual Guy, thank you very much for the follow. Killer Compy, wow, a couple of you guys following me here on Twitch, much appreciated. Shenigan, Red Star, thank you guys all very much. Casual Guy. Bobby wondered what was so urgent on the island that the helicopter would fly in this weather. Through the windshield, she saw the pilot exhale in relief as the helicopter rattled onto the wet sand of the beach. Uniformed men jumped out and flung open the big side door. She heard frantic shouts in Spanish, and Manuel nudged her. They were calling for a doctor. So, just to provide you guys a little bit of context here, in case you're not completely understanding, these are people from InGen. They flew over back to Costa Rica as fast as they could through a storm, and they're calling for a doctor right now. I know that a big thing that a lot of folks, again, don't realize is, for those of you who are just now tuning in, Costa Rica and other countries have fantastic healthcare systems. So just keep that in mind. And they are forefront of the scientific community. Two black crewmen carried a limp body toward her while a white man barked orders. The white man had a yellow slicker. Oh, never heard that word before. The white man had a yellow slicker. I'm assuming it means like a raincoat. Red hair appeared around the edges of his Mets baseball cap. Is there a doctor here? He called to her as she ran up. I'm Dr. Carter, she said. The rain fell in heavy drops. Papa John, JCA Postalakos, thank you very much for the follow, guys. Much appreciated. Thank you, guys. Give me some dubs in the chat for them. Let me see. Let me check the chat real quick, too. I haven't spoken to you guys in a little bit. How we doing, chat? How we doing? Yes, we can read, too. Even the dinosaurs can read now. Humanity is doomed. Yes, Mets baseball cap. Ed Regas is a huge Mets fan. The rain fell in heavy drops, pounding her head and shoulders. The red-haired man frowned at her. She was wearing cut-off jeans and a tank top. She had a stethoscope over her shoulder, the bell already rusted from the salt air. Ed Regas, we've got a very sick man here, doctor. Then you better bring him to San Jose, she said. San Jose was the capital, just 20 minutes away by air. We would, but we can't get over the mountains in this weather. You have to treat him here. Bobby trotted alongside the injured man as they carried him to the clinic. He was a kid, no older than 18. Lifting away the blood-soaked shirt, she saw a big, slashing rip along his shoulder, and another on the leg. Goodbye to those leaving, and hello to you folks who are joining us now. Some of us Raptors are getting a little bit smarter. Sorry, folks, just wanted to open up the Twitch as well, just to see what's going on there. Say hi to everybody over in the Twitch chat. Thank you guys over here. Everybody over in YouTube, give me some W's for the folks over in Twitch. What happened to him? Construction accident, Ed Regas said. He fell. One of the backhoes ran over him. The kid was pale, shivering, and unconscious. Adjusting the mask here. Manuel stood by the bright green door of the clinic, waving his arms. The men brought the body through and set it on the table in the center of the room. Manuel started at intravenous line, and Bobby swung the light over the kid and bent to examine the wounds. Immediately, she could see that they did not look good. The kid would almost certainly die. A big, tearing laceration ran from his shoulder down to his torso. At the edge of the wound, the flesh was shredded. At the center, the shoulder was dislocated, the pale bones exposed. A second slash cut through the heavy muscles of the thigh, deep enough to reveal the pulse of the femoral artery below. Her first impressions was that the leg had been ripped open. Tell me about this injury, she said. I didn't see it, Ed Regas said. They said a backhoe dragged him. Because it almost looks as if he was mauled, Bobby Carter replied, probing the wound. Like most emergency room physicians, he could remember in detail patients she had seen even years before. She had seen 2 maulings. One was a 2-year-old child who had been attacked by a Rottweiler dog. The other was a drunken circus attendant who had an encounter with a Bengal tiger. Both injuries were similar. There was a characteristic look to an animal attack. Mauled? Ed Regas said. No. It was a backhoe, believe me. Ed licked his lips as he spoke. He was edgy, acting as if he had done something wrong. Bobby wondered why. If they were using some inexperienced local workers on the resort construction, they must have accidents all the time. Manuela said, Did you want lavage? Yes, she said, after you block him. She bent lower, probed the wound with her fingertip. If an earth mover had rolled over him, dirt would be forced deep into the wound. But there wasn't any dirt, just a slippery, slimy foam. And the wound had a strange odor to it, a kind of rotten stench, a smell of death and decay. She had never smelled anything like it before. How long ago did this happen? An hour. Again, she noticed how tense Ed Regis was. He had one of those eager, nervous types. He didn't look like a construction foreman, more like an executive. He was obviously out of his depth. Bobby Carter turned back to the injuries. Somehow she didn't think she was seeing mechanical trauma. It just didn't look right. No soil contamination of the wound site and no crush injury component. Mechanical trauma of any sort, an auto injury, a factory accident, almost always had some component of crushing. But here, there was none. Instead, the man's skin was shredded, ripped, across the shoulder and again across his thigh. It really did look like a maul. On the other hand, most of the body was unmarked, which was unusual for an animal attack. She looked again at the head, the hand, the arms, the hands. The hands. She felt a sudden chill when she looked at the kid's hands. There were short, slashing cuts on both palms, and bruises on the wrists and forearms. She had worked in Chicago long enough to know what that meant. "All right," she said. Wait outside a minute." "Why?" Ed Regis said, alarmed. He didn't like that. "Do you want me to help him or not?" she said, and pushed him out of the door and closed it in his face. She didn't know what was going on, but she didn't like it. Manuel hesitated. "I continue to wash?" "Yes," and she said. She reached for her little Olympus point and shoot. She took several snapshots of the injury, shifting her light for a better view. It really did look like bites, she thought. Then the kid groaned, and she put her camera aside and bent towards him. His lips moved, his tongue thick. "Raptor," he said. "Losaraptor." At those words, Manuel froze and stepped back in horror. "What does it mean?" Bobby said. Manuel shook his head. "I do not know, doctor. Losaraptor. No es español." "No?" It sounded to her like Spanish. "Then please continue to wash him." "No, doctor." He wrinkled his nose. "Bad smell." And he crossed himself. Bobby looked again at the slippery foam streaked across the wound. She touched it, rubbing it between her fingers. It seemed almost like saliva. The injured boy's lips moved again. "Raptor," he whispered. In a tone of horror, Manuel said, "It bit him." "What bit him?" "Raptor." "What's a raptor?" "It means hupia." Bobby frowned. The Costa Ricans were not especially superstitious, but she had heard of the hupia mentioned in the villain before. They were said to be night ghosts, faceless vampires who kidnap small children. According to the belief, the hupias had once lived in the mountains of Costa Rica, but now inhabited the islands offshore. Manuel was backing away, murmuring and crossing himself. "It is not normal, this smell. It is the hupia." Bobby was about to order him back to work when the injured youth opened his eyes and sat straight up on the table. Manuel shrieked in terror. The injured boy moaned, twisted his head, looking left to right with wide, staring eyes, and then he explosively vomited blood. He went immediately into convulsions, his body vibrating, and Bobby grabbed for him, but he shuddered off the table onto the concrete floor. He vomited again. There was blood everywhere. Ed Regis opened the door, saying, "What the hell is happening?" And when he saw the blood, he turned away, his hand to his mouth. Bobby was grabbing for a stick to put in the boy's clenched jaws, but even as she did, she knew it was hopeless, and with a final spastic jerk, he relaxed and lay still. She bent to perform mouth-to-mouth, but Manuel grabbed her shoulders fiercely, pulling her back. "No. The hupia will cross over." "Manuel, for God's sake, no!" "No, you do not understand these things." Bobby looked at the body on the ground and realized that it didn't matter. There was no possibility of resuscitating him. Manuel called for the men who came into the room and took the body away. Ed appeared, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, muttering, "I'm sure you did all you could." And then she watched as the men took the body away, back to the helicopter, and it lifted up into this thunderously up into the sky. "It is better," Manuel said. Bobby was thinking about the boy's hands. They had been covered with cuts and bruises in the characteristic pattern of defense wounds. She was quite sure that he had not died in a construction accident. he had been attacked, and he had held his hands up against his attacker. Where is this island that they've come from? In the ocean, perhaps 120 miles offshore. Pretty far for a resort. Manuel watched the helicopter. I hope they never come back. Well, she thought, at least she had pictures. But when she turned back to the table, she saw that her camera was gone. Before I continue reading here, just gonna hop in and say thank you to everybody who just followed me recently here. Diatrimov, Thugmeister, Iron Hawkeye, Mr. Goostuck, Colorless Soldier, thank you guys all very much for following. Chat, give me some W's for them, please. Thank you very much to everyone who's following and subscribing. Much appreciated. Let's see, how's chat looking? Get an S to spit for Nedry. I will not read the whole book tonight, but I'll read a decent amount of it. How we doing over in Twitch? Let's go see how the Twitch chat's doing. How you guys doing over here, Twitch? Oh, well, it's nice to see everybody over here on Twitch. Thank you guys all for watching so very much. All right, let's keep this going. Oops, excuse me about that burp. The rain finally stopped later that night. Alone in the bedroom behind the clinic, Bobby thumbed through her tattered paperback Spanish dictionary. The boy had said raptor, and despite Manuel's protest, she suspected it was a Spanish word. Sure enough, she found it in her dictionary. It meant ravisher or abductor. That gave her pause. The sense of the word was suspiciously close to the meaning of hupia. Of course, she did not believe in the superstition. And no ghost had cut those hands. What had the boy been trying to tell her? From the rest of the room, she heard groans. One of the village women was in the first stage of labor, and Elena Morales, the local midwife, was attending her. Bobby went into the clinic room and gestured to Elena to step outside for a moment. Elena, si, doctor. Do you know what is a raptor? Elena was gray-haired and 60, a strong woman with a practical, no-nonsense air. In the night beneath the stars, she frowned and said, Raptor? Yes, you know the word? Si, Elena nodded. It means a person who comes in the night and takes away a child. A kidnapper? Yes. A hupia? Her whole manner changed with that word. Do not say this word, doctor. Why not? Do not speak of hupia now, Elena said firmly, nodding her head toward the groans of the laboring woman. It is not wise to say this word now. But does a raptor bite and cut his victims? Bite and cut, Elena said, puzzled. No, doctor, nothing like this. A raptor is a man who takes a new baby. She seemed irritated by the conversation, impatient to end it. Elena started back towards the clinic. I will call to you when she is ready, doctor. I think 1 more hour, perhaps 2. Bobby looked in the stars and listened to the peaceful lapping of the surf at the shore. In the darkness, she saw the shadows of the fishing boats anchored offshore. The whole scene was quiet, so normal. She felt foolish to be talking of vampires and kidnapped babies. Bobby went back into her room, remembering again that Manuel had insisted it was not a Spanish word. Out of curiosity, she looked in the little English dictionary, and to her surprise, she found the word there too. Raptor, meaning bird of prey. And that's the end of the prologue, folks. So the way the prologue ends, Aximili and Mumusagi, thank you very much for the follows. Give me some dubs for them, please. But so let's talk about the ending there for a moment. The end of that is this character will not appear for the rest of the book. At least Bobby Carter will not appear for the rest of the book. And the reason for that is because she's just here for the introduction. She's a character who is important for the moment, but now is going away. And I think that's a big part of these books is small people can make a big effect. And this lady, whether she knows it or not, is the start of this whole situation. And that ends the prologue for us and brings us to the first iteration. Each of the iterations in the book has these little pages, this graph will slowly fill in because it's meant to be mathematics, like what Malcolm reads. I apologize for the ads, folks. I see some of you folks in there complaining. You're right, casual guy. The crib scene is not far off. I think it's within the first chapter or two. But let's keep going. So the first iteration, there's always a quote from Malcolm at the bottom of the iteration pages. And this one is, at the earliest drawings of the fractal curve, few clues to the underlying mathematical structure will be seen. So obviously, this is the point of that is, this is the first iteration, the first part of the novel. And at this point, it's hard and difficult to tell where things will go and how the chaos will unfold itself. And that's one very, very heavy part. I mean, even in the films, right, they talk about chaos and everything, but it's a much more involved part of the novel. And you'll see what I mean as we continue to read on, because there's a lot more scientific stuff in the novel than in the film. Alrighty. So the first chapter. So that was the prologue, the bite of the raptor. My favorite dino nuggie. I don't know. I mean, Tyson nuggies are classic, but I wouldn't say they're my favorite necessarily. You know what I mean? Alright, but we should continue reading on. Just one last time, say hi to the chat. That's an interesting message. Iron Hawkeye. Is Hawkeye? I'm not sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. I apologize. But I've never seen the Dorito chip emote, and that's kind of cool, actually. Alright, let's get back to this. This chapter is Almost Paradise. Mike Bowman whistled cheerfully as he drove the Land Rover through the Cabo Blanco Biological Reserve on the west coast of Costa Rica. It was a beautiful morning in July, and the road before him was spectacular, hugging the edge of a cliff, overlooking the jungle and the blue Pacific. According to the guidebooks, Cabo Blanco was unspoiled wilderness, almost a paradise. Seeing it now made Bowman feel as if the vacation was back on track. Cryptic, thanks for the follow, much appreciated. Bowman, a 30-year-old real estate developer from Dallas, had come to Costa Rica with his wife and daughter for a 2-week holiday. The trip had actually been his wife's idea. For weeks, Ellen had filled his head with the wonderful national parks of Costa Rica and how good it would be for Tina to see them. Then, when they had arrived, it turned out Ellen had an appointment to see a plastic surgeon in San Jose. Elena, god dang it. Or not Elena, Ellen. Always gotta be something. That was the first Mike Bowman had heard about the excellent and impressive plastic surgery available in Costa Rica and all the luxurious private clinics in San Jose. Of course, they'd had a huge fight. Mike felt as if she'd lied to him, and she had, and he put his foot down about the plastic surgery business. Anyways, it was ridiculous. Ellen was only 30, and she was a beautiful woman. Hell, she'd been homecoming queen her senior year at Rice, and that was not even 10 years earlier. But Ellen tended to be insecure and worried, and it seemed as if the recent years she had mostly worried about losing her looks. That and, well, everything else. The Land Rover bounced in a pothole, splashing mud. Seated beside him, Ellen said, "Mike, are you sure this is the right road? We haven't seen any other people for hours." "There was another car 15 minutes ago," he reminded her. "Remember, the blue one? Going the other way." "Darling, he wanted a deserted beach," he said. "And that's exactly what you're going to get." Ellen shook her head doubtfully. "I hope you're right." "Yeah, Dad, I hope you're right," said Christina from the back seat. She was 8 years old. "Trust me, I'm right." He drove in silence for a moment. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Look at that view. It's just beautiful." "It's okay," Tina said. Ellen got out a compact and looked at herself in the mirror, pressing her eyes. She sighed and put the compact away. For the younger audience here who might not know, or the male audience who just might not know, a compact is a little mirror, usually used for makeup. The road began to descend, and Mike Bowman concentrated on driving. Suddenly, a small black shape flashed across the road, and Tina shrieked, "Look, look!" And then it was gone, into the jungle. "What was it?" Ellen asked. "A monkey?" "Maybe it was a squirrel monkey," Bowman said. "Can I count it?" Tina said, taking her pencil out. She was keeping a list of all the animals she had seen on her trip, as a project for school. "I don't know," Mike said doubtfully. Tina consulted the pictures in the guidebook. "I don't think it was a squirrel monkey. I think it was just another howler." They had seen several howler monkeys already on their trip. "Hey," she said more brightly, "according to this book, the beaches of Cabo Blanco are frequented by a variety of wildlife, including the howler and white-faced monkeys, three-toed sloths, and quadrimundis. You think we'll see a three-toed sloth, Dad?" "I bet we do." "Really?" "Yeah, just look in the mirror." "Very funny, Dad." The road sloped downward through the jungle toward the ocean. I don't have too much to say about this scene, right? This is all setup. It's all we're getting somewhere to start with. The Bowmans, funnily enough, you guys know them differently because they appear in the Lost World movie, the second movie of the Jurassic Park series, as the rich family at the very beginning of the movie, the ones who get attacked on the beach and everything. But in the book, they're in the first book, and they're not rich. They're just a family on vacation. Don't get me wrong, they're not exactly poor, but doesn't necessarily mean they're the rich one. Yes, I see a couple monkeys in chat. Monkey. Brandon, thank you very much about the donation. Most definitely. I think I'll try to talk about Jurassic Park a little bit more. Much appreciated for the donation, and it really depends on like what kind of content we're focused on making in the future. For right now, I mean, as long as we're going to be reading this book, we'll probably have a decent amount of Jurassic Park content coming out. And I do plan to make some more for Jurassic June this upcoming June. Let's see here. How we doing, Twitch? I see them sometimes. I'm sorry. I do come in here every now and again. Over here in the Twitch chat, my apologize. Do you know about Pickle from Baki? I don't know anything about Pickle from Baki. I've heard about him a lot, so I'm sorry. But I will look into him more, because this is probably like the 100th time that someone's asked me about Pickle from Baki. So I'll look into it. Someone's mentioned something about him to me before. I just don't know who he is off the top of my head. Mike Bowman felt like a hero when they finally reached the beach. A 2-mile crescent of white sand, utterly deserted. He parked the Land Rover in the shade of the palm trees and fringed the beach and got out the boxed lunches. Ellen changed into her bathing suit, saying, "Honestly, I don't know how I'm going to get this weight off." "You look great, hun." Actually, he felt that she was too thin, but he had learned not to mention that. Tina was already running down the beach. "Don't forget you need your sunscreen," Ellen called. "Later," Tina shouted over her shoulders. "I'm going to go see if there's a sloth." Ellen Bowman looked around the beach and then the trees. "You think she's all right?" "Honey, there's nobody here for miles. What about snakes?" "Oh, for God's sake," Mike Bowman said. "There's no snakes on the beach." "Well, there might be. The wife's actually right here. Snakes can very well be on beaches. Why wouldn't they? I mean, that never made any sense to me in the movie or the book. Why would there not be snakes on a beach?" "Honey," he said firmly, "snakes are cold-blooded. They're reptiles. They can't control their body temperature. It's 90 degrees on that stand. If a snake came out, it'd be cooked." Not necessarily true. "Believe me, there's no snakes on the beach." He watched his daughter scampering down the beach, a dark spot on the white sand. Let her go. Let her have a good time. He put his arms around his wife's waist. Going back to that, of course, certain snakes are not going to do better on like super hot sand or anything like that. But, I mean, obviously you guys have seen sand boas or other similar creatures before. It's definitely not, it's not like impossible by any means for a snake to be on a beach, especially in South America where there are plenty of beaches. I agree. I saw that in the chat. Godzilla X Kong will be great, in my opinion, too. I 100% agree. Tina ran until she was exhausted, and then she threw herself down on the sand and gleefully rolled to the water's edge. The ocean was warm, and there was hardly any surf at all. She sat for a while, catching her breath, and then she looked back towards her parents in the car to see how far she had come. Her mother waved, beckoning her to return. Tina waved back cheerfully, pretending she didn't understand. Tina didn't want to put on sunscreen. She also didn't want to go back and hear her mother talk about losing weight. She wanted to stay right here and maybe see a sloth. Tina had seen a sloth 2 days earlier at the zoo in San Jose. It looked like a Muppets character, and it seemed harmless. In any case, it couldn't move fast, and she could easily outrun it. Don't be doing that. Don't go chasing sloths. They get panicked easily. But she's a kid. She doesn't understand that. She's 8 years old. Also, for those of you who don't know, this book is pretty old. It's from 1990. Not like that old by any means, but it's older than I am. Now her mother was calling to her, and Tina decided to move out of the sun, back from the water, and to the shade of the palm trees. In this part of the beach, the palm trees overhung a gnarled tangle of mangrove roots, which blocked any attempt to penetrate inside. Tina sat in the sand and kicked the dried mangrove leaves. She noticed many bird tracks in the sand. Costa Rica was famous for its birds, which is actually very true. Costa Rica has a huge biodiversity, including an amazing amount of birds. Definitely check that out. The guidebook said there were 3 times as many birds in Costa Rica as in all of America and Canada. In the sand, some of the 3-toed bird tracks were small and so faint that she could hardly be seen. Other tracks were large and cut deeper in the sand. Tina was looking idly at the tracks when she heard a chirping, followed by a rustling in the mangrove thicket. Did sloths make a chirping sound? Tina didn't think so, but she wasn't sure. The chirping was probably some kind of ocean bird. She waited quietly, not moving, hearing the rustling again, and finally, she saw the source of the sound. A few yards away, a lizard emerged from the mangrove roots and peered at her. Tina held her breath. A new animal for her list. The lizard stood up on its hind legs, balancing on its thick tail, and stared at her. Standing like that, it was almost a foot tall, dark green with brown stripes along its back. Its tiny front legs ended in little fingers that wiggled in the air. The lizard cocked its head and looked at her. I would keep particular attention to this part. For later pieces of the book, this is super important, so definitely something to keep in mind. Tina thought it was cute, sort of like a big salamander. She raised her head and wiggled her fingers back and forth. The lizard wasn't frightened. It came toward her, walking upright on its hind legs. It was hardly bigger than a chicken, and like a chicken, it bobbed its head as it walked. Tina thought it would make a wonderful pet. She noticed that the little lizards left 3-toed tracks that looked exactly like the bird tracks. The lizard came closer to Tina. She kept her body still, not wanting to frighten the little animal. She was amazed that it would come so close, but she remembered that this was a national park. All the animals in the park would know that they were protected. The lizard was probably tame. Maybe it even expected her to give it some food. Unfortunately, she didn't have any. Slowly, Tina extended her hand, palm open, to show she didn't have any food. The lizard paused, cocked its head, and chirped. "Sorry," Tina said, "I don't have anything." And then, without warning, the lizard jumped up onto her outstretched hand. Tina could feel its little toes pinching the skin of her palms, and she felt the surprising weight of the animal's body pressing her arm down. And then the little lizard scrambled up her arm toward her face. "I just wish I could see her," Ellen Bowman said, squinting in the sunlight. "That's all. Just see her." "I'm sure she's fine," Mike said, picking through the box lunch packed by the hotel. There was an unappetizing grilled chicken and some kind of meat-filled pastry. Not that Ellen would eat any of it. "You don't think she'd leave the beach?" "No, hon, I don't. I feel so isolated here." "I thought that's what you wanted," Mike Bowman said. "I did. Well then, what's the problem?" I wish I could see her, is all," Ellen said. And then, from down the beach, carried by the wind, they heard their daughter's voice. She was screaming. Oh, and that's the end of the first chapter, folks. Let's check in with everybody. How's everyone doing? I'm gonna try not to give spoilers before, we get too far into the book here. Yes, you're right. Sloths can cut you with their claws, though they don't necessarily aim for that. Did someone really go, he said penetrate? Come on now, guys. What's all this? Alton Lavelle, thanks for the sub on YouTube. Much appreciated. Let's see here. Twitch, and I think the Rexy nickname was used. Much apologies, just scrolling through this Twitch chat. I understand if you do happen to switch over to YouTube, but I'm trying to grow here on Twitch as well, so I appreciate anybody who is here on Twitch. Thank you all very much for being here in the first place. Alright, so obviously we know what happened there. Tina got attacked by just one compy, though, not a whole pack or anything like that. And you'll see why one was more than enough to take her down. And this has a whole other implication. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean she's dead, but you'll see what happens. Give me just a moment here. This chapter is Puntaneras. I think she's quite comfortable now, Dr. Cruz said, lowering the plastic flap of the oxygen tent around Tina as she slept. Mike Bowman sat beside the bed, close to his daughter. Mike thought Dr. Cruz was probably pretty capable. He spoke excellent English, the result of training at medical centers in London and Baltimore. Dr. Cruz radiated competence, and the Clinica Santa Maria, the modern hospital in Puntaneras, was spotless and efficient. But even so, Mike Bowman felt nervous. There was no getting around the fact that his only daughter was desperately ill, and they were far from home. When Mike had first reached Tina, she was screaming hysterically. Sombrock, thank you very much for the follow. Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Give me some W's for Sombrock. When Mike had first reached Tina, she was screaming hysterically. Her whole left arm was bloody, exposed, and covered with profusions of small bites, each the size of a thumbprint, and there were flecks of sticky foam on her arm, like a foamy saliva. He carried her back down the beach. Almost immediately, her arm began to redden and swell. Mike would not soon forget the frantic drive back to civilization, the four-wheeled Land Rover slipping and sliding up the muddy track into the hills, while his daughter screamed in fear and pain, and her arm grew more bloated and red. Long before they reached the park boundaries, the swelling had spread to her neck, and then Tina began to have trouble breathing. "She'll be all right now?" Ellen said, staring through the plastic oxygen tent. "I believe so," Dr. Cruz said. "I have given her another dose of steroids, and her breathing is much easier. You can see the edema in her arm is greatly reduced." Mike Bowman said, "About those bites, we have no identification yet," the doctor said. "I myself haven't seen bites like that before. But you'll notice they are disappearing. It's already quite difficult to make them out. Fortunately, I've taken photographs for reference. I've washed her arm to collect some samples of the sticky saliva, one for analysis here, and a second to send to the labs in San Jose. And the third will be kept frozen in case it is needed." Do you have the picture she made?" "Yes," Mike Bowman said. He handed the doctor the sketch that Tina had drawn in response to questions from the admitting officials. This is the animal that bit her," Dr. Cruz said, looking at the picture. "Yes," Mike Bowman said. "She said it was a green lizard, the size of a chicken or a crow." "I don't know of such a lizard," the doctor said. "She has drawn it standing on its hind legs." "That's right," Mike Bowman said. "She said it walked on its hind legs." Dr. Cruz frowned. He stared at the picture a while longer. "I am not an expert. I've asked Dr. Gutierrez to visit us here. He is a senior researcher at the Reserva Biologica de Carrara, which is across the bay. Perhaps he can identify the animal for us." "Isn't there someone from Cabo Blanco?" Bowman asked. "That's where she was bitten." Unfortunately not, Dr. Cruz said. Cabo Blanco has no permanent staff, and no researcher has worked there for quite some time. You are probably the first people to walk on that beach in several months, but I am sure you will find Dr. Gutierrez to be very knowledgeable. Dr. Gutierrez, awesome character. I don't know why I like him. He doesn't do very much in the books, but he's just a cool character. I like him. Dr. Gutierrez turned out to be a bearded man wearing khaki shorts and a shirt. The surprise was that he was American. He was introduced to the Bowmans, saying in a soft southern accent, Mr. and Mrs. Bowman, how you doing? Nice to meet you. And then explained that he was a field biologist from Yale who had worked in Costa Rica for the last 5 years. Marty Gutierrez examined Tina thoroughly, lifting her arms gently, peering closely at each of the bites with a penlight, and then measuring them with a small pocket ruler. After a while, Gutierrez stepped away, nodding to himself as if he had understood something. He then inspected the Polaroids and asked several questions about the saliva, which Cruz told him was being tested in the lab. Finally, he turned to Mike Bowman and his wife, waiting tensely. I think Tina's going to be fine. I just want to be clear about a few details, he said, making notes in precise hand. Your daughter says that she was bitten by a green lizard, approximately 1 foot high, which walked upright on the beach from the mangrove swamp. That's right, yes, and the lizard makes some kind of vocalizations. Tina said it chirped or squeaked. Like a mouse, would you say? Yes. Well then, Dr. Gutierrez said, I know this lizard. He explained that, with the 6,000 species of lizard in the world, no more than a dozen species walked upright. One of these species, only 4 were found in Latin America, and judging by the coloration, the lizard could only be one of the 4. I'm sure that this lizard was Basilicus amoratus, a striped basilisk lizard found here in Costa Rica and also in Honduras. Standing on their hind legs, they are sometimes as tall as a foot. Are they poisonous? No, Mrs. Bowman, not at all, Gutierrez explained that the swelling in Tina's arm was an allergic reaction. According to the literature, 14% of people are strongly allergic to reptiles, he said, and your daughter seems to be one of them. She was screaming. She said it was so painful. And so Tina is actually allergic to the Compi venom, but that's what is happening here. It's venom. It's not her having necessarily an allergic reaction, but part of it is the venom combined with her reaction to it. Sorry, just finding my place here. Gutierrez explained that the swelling in Tina's arm was an allergic reaction. According to the literature, 14% of people are strongly allergic to reptiles, he said, and your daughter seems to be one of them. She was screaming. She said it was so painful. Probably was, Gutierrez said. Reptile saliva contains serotonin, which causes tremendous pains. He turned to Cruz. Her blood pressure came down with antihistamine? Yes, Cruz said, promptly. Serotonin, Gutierrez said, no questions. Still, Ed Bowman remained uneasy. But why would a little lizard bite her in the first place? Lizard bites are actually very common, Gutierrez said. Animal handlers in zoos get bitten all the time, and just the other day I heard that a lizard had bitten an infant in her crib in Amaloya, about 60 miles from where you were. So bites do occur. I'm not sure why your daughter had so many bites, though. What was she doing at the time? Nothing. She said she was sitting pretty still because she didn't want to frighten the thing. Sitting pretty still, Gutierrez said, frowning. He shook his head. Well, I don't think we can say exactly what happened. Wild animals are often unpredictable. And what about the foamy saliva on her arm? Ellen said. I keep thinking about rabies. No, Gutierrez said. A reptile can't carry rabies, Mrs. Bowman. Your daughter has suffered an allergic reaction to the bite of a basilisk lizard. Nothing more. Mike Bowman then showed Gutierrez the pictures Tina had drawn. Gutierrez nodded. I would accept this as a picture of a basilisk lizard, he said. A few of the details are wrong, of course. The neck is much too long, and she has drawn the hind legs with only 3 toes instead of 5. The tail is too thick, and its raised too high. But otherwise, this is a perfectly serviceable lizard of the kind we are talking about. But Tina specifically said the neck was long, Ellen Bowman insisted, and she said that there were 3 toes on the foot. Tina's pretty observant, Mike Bowman said. I'm sure she is, Gutierrez said, smiling, but I still think your daughter was bitten by a common Bacillus amuratus and may have had had a severe herpetological reaction. Normal time course with medication is 12 hours. She should be just fine in the morning. Ooh, it gets a little taxing reading that fast sometimes. DM, thanks for the sub, much appreciated. What got taken down by YouTube? Oh, yeah, the original one. I thought you meant my live stream was for a second. I was like, wait, huh? I was like, how are people still chatting then? That was confusing me. Yep, I agree. I'm going to drink some water. I'm not going to leave here. Just give me one moment. Just going to put us on an intermission screen. Everybody still hear me? Everybody doing okay? Humans can get rabies. Yes, of course, Horror Boy. It's just reptiles cannot give humans rabies because reptiles themselves cannot carry rabies. The Meg novel would not be a bad idea. I'll definitely keep that in mind. I think if I am to read another book after Jurassic Park, it's going to be the next Jurassic Park one. You know what I'm saying? The second Jurassic Park book. Ugh. Yeah, exactly. Hunting for water. No, I got water right here. Ugh. How's everybody feeling? Twitch, how are you guys doing too over there? It is a pretty good book. I've never played Exoprimal Shen. I've seen a lot of gameplay, and I shouldn't say I've never played it. I played a little bit of it, but I've just never really played it. I'm doing alright. Horror Boy, what was your earlier question? I did not see it. No, Kaiju Artist, I'm still here. I believe in you. I love you. Gianna, I cannot do that. Well, I can, but I won't. I can't be showing my face like that. Exoprimal Iron is like a game where you're fighting dinosaurs, basically. It's like a Capcom game that's just shooting a bunch of waves of dinosaurs. I don't know a ton about it. I played like 25 minutes of it. I haven't heard the best things about it, though, so I have kind of stayed away from it. No, Alexis, I'm not going to read the whole book today. My plan is to read the book probably over a few different ones. I mean, we've been going at this for almost an hour now, and we've only got like a chapter and a half, 2 chapters done. So it's not fast, you know what I'm saying? It's not going to be super quick to get through, especially because I don't want to rush it. You know what I'm saying? We deserve to. I feel like you guys deserve to watch the full entirety of it and read the full entirety of it, and at its own pace. No, I do not have any paleo art of my own. I don't know if I really wanted any character to die in the novels that I like that bad. Other than Hammond and Dodgson, like they're the only ones who really genuinely deserved it. I mean, even in the second book, Basilton and King kind of deserved it. I mean, they weren't great people, but they weren't the worst. I definitely understand Levine. Levine's not a great human being, so but he's smart. That's his only saving grace is Levine is smart and technically a good guy. All right. Gotta get a few good chugs of this water in. What do you guys think of the lighting, the ambiance? You guys think that's a smart idea? You guys enjoying that at all? Alright, folks, give me just a moment here and I'll be right back. Thugmeister, you're definitely 100% right. Dr. Thorne is a real one, and no one knows enough about that. Dr. Thorne is the OG, and we're coming back here. Give me 1 second. Turning it back to live scene now. Alright, chat, we are back and in business. Let's get her going here. Sorry, just trying to get my phone caught up to everything, so that way we are all good. Alright. Also, this edition happens to have both the Jurassic Park and the Lost World in it, so definitely recommend getting this one. I always get mine at Barnes & Noble's. I've accidentally bought this book like 3 times now, so, you know. But it happens. Who doesn't own a couple of copies of their favorite book? Alright. Back to it. In the modern laboratory in the basement of the Clinica Santa Maria, word was received that Dr. Gutierrez had identified the animal that had bitten the American child as a harmless basilisk lizard. Immediately, the analysis of the saliva was halted, even though a preliminary fractionation showed that several extremely high molecular weight proteins of unknown biological activity. But the night technician was busy, and he put the saliva samples on the holding shelf of the refrigerator. The next morning, the day clerks checked the holding shelf against the names of the discharged patients. Seeing that Bowman Christina L. was scheduled for discharge that morning, the clerk threw out the samples. At the last moment, he noticed that one of the samples had a red tag, which meant that it was to be forwarded to another university lab in San Jose. He retrieved the test tube from the wastebasket and sent it on its way. Go on, say thank you to Dr. Cruz, Ellen Bowman said, and pushed Tina forward. Thank you, Dr. Cruz, Tina said. I feel much better now. She reached up and shook the doctor's hands. Then she said, You have a different shirt than you did before. For a moment, Dr. Cruz looked perplexed, and then he smiled. That's right. When I work all night at the hospital in the morning, I change my shirt. But not your tie? No, just my shirt. Ellen Bowman laughed and said, Mike told you she's observant. She certainly is, Dr. Cruz smiled and shook the little girl's hand. Enjoy the rest of your trip in Costa Rica, Tina. I will. The Bowman family had started to leave when Dr. Cruz said, Oh, Tina, do you remember the lizard that bit you? Uh-huh. Do you remember its feet? Uh-huh. Did it have any toes? Yes. How many toes did it have? 3, she said. How do you know that? Because I looked, she said. Anyway, all those birds on the beach made marks in the sand with 3 toes, like this. She said. She held up her middle 3 fingers spread wide, and the lizard made those kind of marks in the sand too. The lizard made marks like a bird? Uh-huh, Tina said. It walked like a bird too. He jerked his head up and down like this. And she took a few steps, bobbing her head up and down. After that, the Bowmans departed, and Dr. Cruz decided to report this conversation to Gutierrez at the biological station. I must admit, the girl's story is puzzling, Gutierrez said. I've been doing some checking myself, and I am no longer certain she was bitten by a basilisk. Not certain at all. Then what could it be? Well, Gutierrez said, let's not speculate prematurely. By the way, have you heard any of the other lizard bites at the hospital? No, why? Let me know if you do, my friend. Let me know if you do. And that's the end of that chapter. Bringing us to another one pretty quickly there. Because we were kind of at the end of the other one anyway, so... How's everybody doing in here? Everybody doing all right? Everybody enjoying yourselves? It might be a Procompsognathus. You don't know for sure until you know for sure. Know what I'm saying? Nah, I mean. All right. So another thing too to keep in mind here is that these characters are all starting to get suspicious. They're starting to figure out that something's not right here, and it's a good thing. People should always be questioning stuff like this, especially when it comes to science. The next chapter is titled The Beach. Marty Gutierrez sat on the beach and watched the afternoon sun fall lower in the sky until it sparkled harshly on the water of the bay, and its rays reached beneath the palm trees to where he sat amongst the mangroves on the beach of Cabo Blanco. At best, he could determine he was sitting near the spot where the American girl had been 2 days before. Although it was true enough, as he had told the Bowmans, that lizard bites were common, Gutierrez had never heard of a basilisk lizard biting anyone, and he had certainly never heard of anyone being hospitalized for a lizard bite. Then, too, the bite radius on Tina's arm appeared slightly too large for a basilisk. When he got back to the Carrara station, he had checked the small research laboratory there, but found that 2 references to the basilisk lizard bites. Next, he checked the International Biosciences Services, a computer database in America, but he found no references to basilisk bites or hospitalization for lizard bites. He then called the medical officer in Amaloya, who confirmed that a 9-day-old infant sleeping in its crib had been bitten on the foot by an animal the grandmother, the only person to actually see it, claimed was a lizard. Subsequently, the foot had become swollen and the infant had nearly died. The grandmother described the lizard as green with brown stripes. It had bitten the child several times before the woman had managed to frighten it away. Strange, Gutierrez said. No, it's like all the others, the medical officer replied, adding that he had heard of other biting incidents. A child in Vasquez, the next village up the coast, had been bitten while sleeping, and another in Puerto Sotrero. Puerto Sotrero. Man, I could. Stammer, thanks for the sub, much appreciated. All these incidents had occurred in the last 2 months. All had involved sleeping children and infants. Such a new and distinctive pattern led Gutierrez to suspect the presence of a previously unknown species of lizard. This was particularly likely to happen in Costa Rica. Only 75 miles wide at its narrowest point, the country was smaller than the state of Maine. Yet, within its hundreds of miles of space, within its limited space, Costa Rica had a remarkable diversity of biological habitats, seacoasts on both the Atlantic and Pacific, 4 separate mountain ranges, including 12,000-foot peaks and active volcanoes, rainforests, cloud forests, temperate zones, swampy marshes, and arid deserts. Such ecological diversity sustained an astonishing diversity of plant and animal life that in Costa Rica had 3 times as many species of birds as all of North America, more than 1,000 species of orchids, and more than 5,000 species of insects. Costa Rica does have an insane biodiversity, though I'm not entirely sure if these statistics are correct. New species were being discovered all the time at a pace that had increased in recent years for sad reasons. Costa Rica was becoming deforested, and as jungle species lost their habitats, they moved to other areas and sometimes changed behavior as well. So a new species was perfectly possible, but along with the excitement of a new species was the worrisome possibility of new diseases. Lizards carried viral diseases, including several that could be transmitted to humans. The most serious was central saurian encephalitis, or CSE, which caused a form of sleeping sickness in human beings and horses. Gutierrez felt that it was important to find this new lizard, if only to test for disease. Sitting on the beach, he watched the sun drop lower and sighed. Perhaps Tina Bowman had seen a new animal, and perhaps not. Certainly Gutierrez had not. Earlier that morning, he had taken the air pistol, loaded the clip with ligamine darts, and set off for the beach with high hopes. But the day was wasted. Soon, he would have to begin the drive back up the hill from the beach, and he did not want to drive that road in darkness. Gutierrez got to his feet and started back up the beach. Farther along, he saw the dark shape of a howler monkey, ambling along the edge of the mangrove swamp. Gutierrez moved away, stepping out toward the water. If there was one howler, there would probably be others in the trees overhead. and howlers tended to urinate on intruders. But this particular howler monkey seemed to be alone, and walking slowly, pausing frequently to sit on its haunches. The monkey had something in its mouth. As Gutierrez came closer, he saw that it was eating a lizard. The tail and the hind legs drooped from the monkey's jaws. Even from a distance, Gutierrez saw the brown stripes against green. Gutierrez dropped to the ground and aimed the pistol. The howler monkey, accustomed to living in a protected reserve, stared curiously. He did not run away, even when the first dart whined harmlessly past him. When the second dart struck deep in the thigh, the howler shrieked in anger and surprise, dropping the remains of its meals, and fled into the jungle. Sorry, it gets particularly hot when I'm reading in here. Gutierrez got to his feet and walked forward. He wasn't worried about the monkey. The tranquilizer dose was too small to give it anything but a few minutes of dizziness. Already he was thinking of what to do with his new find. Gutierrez himself would write the preliminary report, but the remains would have to be sent back to the United States for final positive identification, of course. To whom should he send it? The acknowledged expert was Edward H. Simpson, emeritus professor of zoology at Columbia University in New York. An elegant older man with swept-back white hair, Simpson was the world's leading authority on lizard taxonomy. Probably, Marty thought, he would send the lizard to Dr. Simpson. And that is the end of that chapter. Let's have a bit of discussion here real quick. So what are folks thinking? Like, any predictions? Anything you guys have that you think might happen? Let's see some viewer predictions here. I'm gonna read some. Hey, thank you very much, LM. I appreciate you watching. Oh, give me 1 second here. Yeah, I am okay in the mass diatrimav. I'm just, it gets a little hot in there, so sometimes I need to take it off so I can breathe a little easier. I was just also reading really fast in that part. I'm going to try to get to the crib scene tonight. I'm pretty sure it's within the next chapter or two here, so. I see some of you comments, and I know you want it. I know you want that crib scene. It's a horrifying scene, so I don't blame you. It's probably one of the most popular in the entire book. I don't want to disable animated emos. Dinofax is my favorite Tyrannosaur besides T-Rex. My favorite Tyrannosaur isn't actually even T-Rex. My favorite Tyrannosaur is Nanuqsaurus. If I had to pick one aside from Nanuqsaurus, I'd probably say Kinjalosaurus. Dilo in the novel is an absolute menace, and you cannot convince me otherwise. And you're definitely going to see what I mean when we get to that part. But that's probably not going to be until part 2, maybe 3. We'll see how it goes. I have actually been reading for about an hour now, everything. Oofda. Oofda, oofda, oofda. Can you tell I'm Midwestern? Or I live in the Midwest at least. T-Rex and Gallimimus are great dinosaur choices. Dimetrodon is an awesome animal. Alright. Before we go back into this, let's just double check Twitch here. Alrighty. Alright, back to it. How's everybody feeling, folks? Everybody doing well? It's alright, Stammer. For everything you missed so far, the rest of this video will still be posted online. So you can still catch it at a later point. Alright, and chat is back up and running, folks. So, let's continue our little read-through. This chapter is titled New York. Dr. Richard Stone, the head of Tropical Diseases Laboratory of Columbia University Medical Center, often remarked that the name conjured up a grander place than it actually was. In the early 20th century, when the laboratory occupied the entire fourth floor of the biomedical research building, crews of technicians worked to eliminate the scourges of yellow fever, malaria, and cholera. But medical successes and research laboratories in Nairobi and Sao Paulo had left the TDL a much less important place than it once was. Now a fraction of its former size, it employed only 2 full-time technicians, and they were primarily concerned with diagnosing illnesses of New Yorkers who had traveled abroad. The lab's comfortable routine was unprepared for what it received that morning. Oh, very nice, the technician in the Tropical Disease Laboratory said as she continued to read the customs label. Partially masticated fragment of unidentified Costa Rican lizard. She wrinkled her nose. This one's all yours, Dr. Stone. Richard Stone crossed the lab to inspect the new arrival. Is this the material from Ed Simpson's lab? Yes, but I don't know why they'd send a lizard to us. His secretary called, Stone said. Simpson's on a field trip in Borneo for the summer, but there's a question of communicable diseases with this lizard, and she asked our lab to take a look at it. Let's see what we've got here. The white plastic cylinder was the size of a half-gallon milk container. It had locking metal latches and a screw top. It was labeled International Biological Specimens Container, and plastered with stickers and warnings in 4 languages. The warning was intended to keep the cylinder from being opened by suspicious customs officials. Apparently, the warnings had worked, as Richard Stone swung the big light over, and he could see the seals were still intact. Stone turned on the air handlers and pulled on plastic gloves and a face mask. After all, the lab had recently identified specimens contained with Venezuelan equine fever, Japanese bee encephalitis, Chiasenur forest virus, Langat virus, and Mayaro. Then he unscrewed the top. Sorry, I do not know any of those disease names, so a lot of that was very unfamiliar for me. And that's just my lamp, making those clacky noises. So, you know, it be happening like that sometimes. There was a hiss of escaping gas, and the white smoke boiled out. The cylinder turned frosty cold. Inside, he found a plastic Ziploc sandwich bag containing something green. Stone spread a surgical drape on the table and shook out the contents of the bag. A piece of frozen flesh struck the table with a dull thud. Huh, the technician said. Looks eaten. Yes, it does, Stone said. What do they want with us? The technician consulted the enclosed documents. Lizard is biting local children. They have a question about identification of the species and a concern about transmitted diseases from the bite. She produced a child's picture of a lizard, signed Tina, at the top. One of the kids drew a picture of the lizard. Stone glanced at the picture. Obviously, we can't verify the species, he said, but we can check the disease easily enough if we can get any blood out of this fragment. What are they calling this animal? Basilicus amoratus, with a 3-toe genetic anomaly, she said. Okay, let's get started. While you're waiting for it to thaw, do an x-ray and take Polaroids for the record. Once we have blood, start running antibody sets until we get some matches. Let me know if there's a problem. Sorry, my nose is a little itchy there. So, this is obviously a research lab, and they're testing for diseases, which is why the lizard got sent to them, because they're worried it might have transmitted some kind of disease to Tina. Before lunchtime, the lab had its answer. The lizard blood showed no significant reactivity to any viral or bacterial antigen. They had run toxicity profiles as well, and they found they had only one positive match. The blood was mildly reactive to the venom of the Indian king cobra. But such cross-reactivity was common among reptile species, and Dr. Stone did not think it noteworthy to include in the facts to his technician sent to Dr. Martin Gutierrez that same evening. There was never any question about identifying the lizard. That would await the return of Dr. Simpson. He was not due back for several weeks, and his secretary asked if the TDL would please store the lizard fragment in the meantime. Dr. Stone put it back in the Ziploc bag and stuck it in the freezer. So they're not finding any diseases. They're not finding any issues. All they've seen is that the venom is similar to that of a king cobra. Martin Gutierrez read the facts from the Columbia Medical Center Tropical Diseases Laboratory. It was brief. Subject, Basiliscus amaratus with three-toe genetic anomaly. Posterior segment, partially eaten animal. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to show you guys the chart. If I can get it to look good. So you see here, it's just a kind of a little chart. That's going to be one thing. I have to bring that up in future videos when they show charts and stuff, because there will be charts. So hopefully I can just get something like right here that I can just show the chart on. It'll make it a little easier. But basically, the chart is just saying there's no evidence for any communicable diseases about it, and that it doesn't seem like it's carrying any diseases. That's basically the whole gist of the letter there. Gutierrez made two assumptions based on the memo. First, that his identification of the lizard as a basilisk had been confirmed by scientists at Columbia University. And second, that the absence of communicable disease meant that the recent episodes of sporadic lizard bites implied no serious health hazards for Costa Rica. On the contrary, he felt his original views were correct, that a lizard species had been driven from the forest into a new habitat and were coming into contact with village people. Gutierrez was certain that in a few more weeks the lizards would settle down and the biting episodes would end. Here's what you've been waiting for, folks. I know a lot of you have been asking for this. This is the scene. The tropical rain fell in great, drenching sheets, hammering the corrugated roof of the clinic in Bahia Anasco. It was nearly midnight. Power had been lost in the storms, and the midwife Elena Morales was working by flashlight when she heard a squeaking, chirping sound. Thinking that it was a rat, she quickly put a compress on the forehead of the mother and went into the next room to check on the newborn baby. As her hand reached the doorknobs, she heard the chirping again, and she relaxed. Evidently, it was just a bird, flying in the window to get out of the rain. Costa Ricans said that it was when a bird came to visit a newborn child, it brought good luck. Elena opened the door. The infant lay in a wicker bassinet, swaddled in a light blanket, only its face exposed. Around the rim of the bassinet, 3 dark green lizards crouched like gargoyles. When they saw Elena, they cocked their heads and stared at her curiously, but they did not flee. In the light of her flashlight, Elena saw the blood dripping from their snouts. Softly chirping, one lizard bent down and with a quick shake of its head, tore a ragged chunk of flesh from the baby. Elena rushed forward screaming, and the lizards fled into the darkness, but long before she reached the bassinet, she could see what had happened to the infant's face, and she knew the child would be dead. The lizards scattered into the rainy night, chirping and squealing, leaving behind only bloody 3-toed tracks like birds. And that's the end of that chapter there. Dun dun dun. Yeah, it gets pretty dark, guys. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some like less dangerous stuff, but that one is a pretty rough part, especially for some younger folks. And honestly, I mean, it's a baby. Iron Hawkeye, I'm sorry you're stuck in the hospital. No, you're right. This ain't no, this is definitely not Land Before Time. Alright, back to it. And again, that's a pretty dark part of the novel. Babies don't really get hurt more throughout the rest of the novel, if I remember correctly, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. Unless you're worried about dinosaur babies, which you should be. Later, when she was calmer, Elena Morales decided not to report the lizard attack. Despite the horror she had seen, she began to worry that she might be criticized for leaving the baby unguarded. So she told the mother that the baby had asphyxiated, and she reported the death on the forms she sent to San Jose as SIDS, Sudden Infant Death Syndrome. This was a syndrome of unexplained death among very young children. It was unremarkable, and her report went unchallenged. Which, I get being scared for yourself and your job and all that stuff, but, I mean, you lied. That lady lied about that child's death. The university lab in San Jose that analyzed the sample from Tina Bowman's arm made several remarkable discoveries. There was, as expected, a great deal of serotonin, but among the salivary proteins there was a real monster, molecular mass of 1980, one of the largest proteins known. Biological activity was still under study, but it seemed to be a neurotoxic poison related to cobra venom, although more primitive in structure. So it's a type of venom very closely to that would act similar to a cobra, a type of neurotoxicity, but much weaker. The lab also detected trace quantities of the gamma-amino methionine hydrolase. Sorry, I don't know those words very much. The lab also detected trace quantities of the gamma-amino methionine hydrolase. Because of this enzyme was a marker for genetic engineering and not found in wild animals, technicians assumed it was a lab contaminated and did not report what they called to Dr. Cruz. And did not report it when they called Dr. Cruz, the referring physician in Puttaneras. Sorry, reading too fast sometimes. The lizard fragment rested in the freezer at Columbia University, awaiting the return of Dr. Simpson, who was not expected for at least a month. And so things might have remained, had not a technician named Alice Levin walked in the tropical disease laboratory, seen Tina Bowman's picture, and said, "Oh, whose kid drew the dinosaur?" And so I've seen a lot of people say Alice is not a worker here, or that she's a janitor. I don't know where people get that. Alice Levin, it literally said there as a technician. The same level as Stone was, a few pieces earlier in the last chapter. She's the other technician. I don't know what's going on, but either way. Alice Levin walked in the tropical disease laboratory, seen Tina Bowman's picture, and said, "Oh, whose kid drew the dinosaur?" "What?" Richard Stone said, turning slowly towards her. "The dinosaur. Isn't that what it is? My kid draws them all the time." "This is a lizard," Stone said, "from Costa Rica. Some girl down there drew a picture of it." "No," Alice Levin said, shaking her head. "Look at it. It's very clear. Big head, long neck, stands on its hind legs, thick tail. It's a dinosaur." "It can't be. It's only a foot tall." "So? There were little dinosaurs back then," Alice said. "Believe me, I know. I have 2 boys. I'm an expert." My mom would agree with her. "The smallest dinosaurs were under a foot. Teenosaurus or something. I don't know. That obviously not the actual name." "Those names are impossible. You never learn those names if you're over the age of 10. "You don't understand," Richard Stone said. "This is a picture of a contemporary animal. They sent us a fragment of this animal. It's in the freezer now." Stone went to get it and shook it out of the baggie. Alice Levin looked at the frozen piece of leg and tail and shrugged. She didn't touch it. "I don't know, but that looks like a dinosaur to me." Stone shook his head. "Impossible." "Why?" Alice Levin said. "It could be a leftover or a remnant or whatever they call them." Stone continued to shake his head. Alice was uninformed, and she was just a technician who worked in the bacteriology lab down the hall, and she had an active imagination. Stone remembered that when she thought she was being followed by one of the surgical orderlies. "You know," Alice Levin said, "if this is a dinosaur, Richard, it could be a big deal. It's not a dinosaur. Has anybody checked it?" "No," Stone said. "Well, take it to the Museum of Natural History or something. You really should." "I'd be embarrassed." "You want me to do it for you?" "No," Richard Stone said, "I don't." "You're not going to do anything?" "Nothing at all." And he put the baggie back in the freezer and slammed the door. "It's not a dinosaur. It's a lizard. And whatever it is, it can wait until Dr. Simpson gets back from Borneo to identify it. That's final, Alice. The lizard's not going anywhere." So a lot of these chapters go pretty quickly. That was the chapter called The Shape of the Data. How's everybody doing? Everybody enjoying the book so far? We're working on a Discord water bottle. I'll hopefully have one up for everyone here soon. Not a dino womp womp. The book, Daniel, is Jurassic Park. Oh my, 1 o'clock at night for you? That's kind of nutty. It's not even 9 o'clock over here yet. All right, but let's keep her going, eh? All right, so now we get into the second iteration. Once again, sorry, I'm just bringing this up so I can make sure I'm showing you. They do this, right? So you get the shape of the data over here as the lines get a little more intense. This one reads, with subsequent drawings of the fractal curve, sudden changes may appear. And this is Ian Malcolm is making these because he, again, is a huge part of the book. The boys are back in town. I don't know why that just randomly started playing in my head, but it did. The boys are back in town. Wow, wow. Down. All right. This chapter is titled The Shore of the Inland Sea, and here's where we meet our main character. Alan Grant crouched down, his nose inches from the ground. The temperature was over 100 degrees. His knees ached despite the rug layers pads he wore. His lungs burned from the harsh alkaline dust. Sweat dripped off his forehead onto the ground, but Grant was oblivious to the discomfort. His entire attention was focused on the 6-inch square of earth in front of him. Working patiently with a dental pick and an artist's camel brush, he exposed the tiny L-shaped fragment of jawbone. It was only an inch long and no thicker than his little finger. The teeth were a small row of points, and they had a characteristic medial angling. Bits of bone flaked away as he dug. Grant paused for a moment to paint the bone with rubber cement before continuing to expose it. There was no question that this was the jawbone from an infant carnivorous dinosaur. So, pause here, side note. Infant dinosaurs in general are like extremely rare. They have thinner and weaker bones, and it's harder for them to preserve. So the finding of an infant dinosaur in any capacity is usually pretty impressive, let alone what Grant's doing and finding one that's not a hatchling, so out of the nest, but also not like grown enough to where it's lost a lot of its juvenile characteristics, which is actually super cool from a paleontological perspective. Alright, anyways. Its owner had died 79 million years ago, at the age of about 2 months. With any luck, Grant might find the rest of the skeleton as well. If so, it would be the first complete skeleton of a baby carnivorous... Hey, Alan! Someone cut him off. Alan looked up, blinking in the sunlight. He pulled down his sunglasses and wiped his forehead with the back of his arm. He was crouched on an eroded hillside in the Badlands outside Snakewater, Montana. Beneath the great blue bowl of sky, blunted hills and exposed outcroppings of crumbling limestone stretched for miles in every direction. There was not a tree or a bush, nothing but barren rock, hot sun, and whining wind. Visitors found the Badlands depressingly bleak, but when Grant looked out the landscape, he saw something else entirely. This barren landscape was what remained of another, vastly different world, which had vanished 80 million years ago. In his mind's eye, Grant saw himself back in the warm, swampy bayou that formed the shoreline of the great inland sea. And here's what he's talking about. The shore of the inland sea is the Western Interior Seaway, which is something we've talked about a bunch. It basically split North America in half during the Cretaceous. So it was a very important piece of the landscape, and it divided North America. Most of the dinosaurs we think of from Cretaceous North America, Triceratops, T-Rex, all that stuff, is technically from the western half of what is modern-day North America. Anyways, this inland sea was 1,000 miles wide, extending all the way from the newly upthrust Rocky Mountains to the sharp, craggy peak of the Appalachians. All of the American West was underwater. At the time, there were thin clouds in the sky overhead, darkened by the smoke of nearby volcanoes. The atmosphere was denser, richer in carbon dioxide. Plants grew rapidly along the shoreline. There was no fish in these waters, but there were clams and snails, which, I don't know why he says that. There would definitely be fish there, if I remember correctly. Pterosaurs swooped down to scoop algae from the surface. A few carnivorous dinosaurs prowled the swampy shores of the lake, moving among the palm trees, and offshore was a small island, about 2 acres in size. Ringed with dense vegetation, this island formed a protective sanctuary where herds of herbivorous duck-billed dinosaurs laid their eggs in communal nests and raised their squeaking young. I love the way Grant thinks. I'm sorry. I know it's kind of classic and cliche, but that's how I feel. Over the millions of years that followed, the pale green alkaline lake grew shallower and finally vanished. The exposed land buckled and cracked under the heat, and the offshore island with its dinosaur eggs became the eroded hillside of northern Montana, which Alan Grant was now excavating. "Hey, Alan!" He stood, a barrel-chested, bearded man of 40, and heard the clanging of the portable generator and the distant clatter of the jackhammer cutting into the dense rock on the next hill. He saw the kids working around the jackhammer, removing the big pieces of rock after checking them for fossils. At the foot of the hill, he saw the 6 teepees of his camp, the flapping mast tent, and the trailer that served as their field laboratory. And he saw Ellie waving to him from the shadow of the field laboratory. "Visitor!" she called and pointed towards the cast. What? Oh, pointed towards the east. Grant saw the cloud of dust and the blue Ford sedan bouncing over the rutted road towards them. He glanced at his watch right on time. On the other side of the hill, the kids looked up with interest. They didn't get many visitors in Snakewater, and there had been a lot of speculation about what a lawyer from the Environmental Protection Agency would want to see Alan Grant about. Okay, I have to say this because they mentioned the Environmental Protection Agency. EPA! 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 Alright, I'm done. I had to do that. Had to is a strong word, wanted to, but, you know, if you know, you know. I was crazy once. They locked me in a room. A rubber room with raptors. Raptors make me crazy. Crazy? I was crazy once. Sorry, I'm starting to go crazy now. Okay. EPA! But Grant knew that paleontology, the entire study of extinct life, had in recent years taken an unexpected relevance in the modern world. The modern world was changing fast, and urgent questions about weather, deforestation, global warming, or the ozone layer often seemed unanswerable, at least in part with information from the past. Information that paleontologists could provide. He had been called on as an expert witness twice in the past few years. Grant started down the hill to meet the car. The visitor coughed in the white dust as he slammed the car door. "Bob Morris, EPA," he said, extending his hand. "I'm with the San Francisco office." Grant introduced himself and said, "You look hot. You want a beer?" "Jesus, yeah," Morris said. Morris was in his late 20s, wearing a tie and pants from a business suit. He carried a briefcase. His wing-tip shoes crunched on the rocks as they walked toward the trailer. "When I first came over the hill, I thought this was an Indian reservation." Also, that terms like that are going to appear in here. Unfortunately, this wasn't like at a time where people were more sensitive about that kind of thing. So terms like Indian do appear. Even though these people aren't Indian, they're Native American. Versus, someone like me and my family who actually comes from Indian descent. Alright, where are we? "I thought this was an Indian reservation," Morris said, pointing towards the teepees. "No," Grant said, "just the best way to live out here." Grant explained that in 1978, the first year of their excavations, they had come out in North Slope octahedral tents, the most advanced tents available at the time. But the tents always blew over in the wind. They tried other kinds of tents with the same result. Finally, they just started putting up teepees, which were larger inside, more comfortable, and more stable in the wind. "These are Blackfoot teepees, built around 4 poles," Grant said. "Sioux teepees are built around 3, but this used to be Blackfoot territory, so we thought." "Uh-huh," Morris said. "Very fitting." He squinted at the desolate landscape and shook his head. "How long have you been out here?" "About 60 cases," Grant said. When Morris looked surprised, he kind of laughed and explained, "We measure time in beer. We start in June with 100 cases. We've gone through about 60 so far." 63 to be exact, Ellie Sattler said as they reached the trailer. Grant was amused to see Morris gaping at her. Ellie was wearing cut-off jeans and a work shirt tied at her midriff. She was 24 and darkly tanned. Her blonde hair was pulled back. "Ellie keeps us going," Grant said, introducing her. "She's very good at what she does." "And what does she do?" Morris asked. "Paleobotany," Ellie said, "and I also do the standard field preps." She opened the door and they went inside. The air conditioning in the trailer only brought the temperature down to 85 degrees, but it seemed cool after the midday heat. The trailer had a series of long wooden tables with tiny bone specimens neatly laid out, tagged, and labeled. Farther along were ceramic dishes and crocks. There was a strong odor of vinegar. Morris glanced at the bones. "I thought dinosaur bones were big," he said. "They were," Ellie said, "but everything you see here comes from babies. Snake water is important primarily because of the number of dinosaur nesting sites here. Until we started this work, there were hardly any infant dinosaurs known. Only one nest had ever been found in the Gobi Desert. We discovered a dozen different hadrosaur nests complete with eggs and bones of infants." So, one thing to note here is, basically Grant in this universe has replaced Jack Horner. Because this is describing Jack Horner's discovery of a place called Egg Mountain, which is, and was, a huge and very important deal in paleontology. I completely understand, Cryptic. Sorry, just checking and seeing your comment right now. But let's keep going. All right. While Grant went to the refrigerator, she showed Morris the acetic acid baths, which is where they used to dissolve away the limestone from delicate bones. "They look like chicken bones," Morris said, peering into the ceramic dishes. "Yes, and they're very bird-like." "And what about those?" Morris said, pointing through the trailer window to piles of large bones outside, wrapped in heavy plastic. "Rejects," Ellie said. "Bones too fragmentary when we took them out of the ground. In the old days, we just discard them, but nowadays we send them for genetic testing." "Genetic testing?" Morris said. "Here you go," Grant said, thrusting a beer into his hand. He gave another to Ellie. She chugged hers, throwing her long neck back, and Morris stared. "We're pretty informal here," Grant said. "Want to step into my office?" "Sure," Morris said. Grant led him through to the end of the trailer, where there was a torn couch, a sagging chair, and a battered end table. Grant dropped onto the couch, which creaked and exhaled a cloud of chalky dust. He leaned back, thumped his boots up on the end table, and gestured for Morris to sit in the chair. "Make yourself comfortable." "You know what, Grant? I think I'll do just that by adjusting my helmet." Grant was a professor of paleontology at the University of Denver and was one of the foremost researchers in his field, but he had never been comfortable with social niceties. He saw himself as an outdoor man, and he knew that all the important work in paleontology was done outdoors with your hands. Grant had little patience for the academics, for the museum curators, or for what he called the teacup dinosaur hunters, and he took some pains to distance himself in dress and behavior from the teacup dinosaur hunters, even delivering his lectures in jeans and sneakers. Grant watched as Morris primly brushed off the seat of the chair before he sat down. Morris opened his briefcase, rummaged through his papers, and glanced back at Ellie, who was lifting bones with tweezers from the acid bath at the other end of the trailer, paying no attention to them. "You're probably wondering why I'm here." "Yeah, Mr. Eepa, he is." Grant nodded. "It's a long way to come, Mr. Morris. Well, to get right to the point, the EPA is concerned about the activities of the Hammond Foundation. You received some funding from them." $30,000 a year, Grant said, "for the last 5 years. What do you know about the foundation?" "The Hammond Foundation is a respected resource of academic grants," Grant said, shrugging. "They fund research all over the world, including several dinosaur researchers. I know they support Bob Carey out of Terrell in Alberta and John Weller in Alaska, probably more." How are we looking here? I forgot to check YouTube when I was checking chats last time. My apologies, chat. Did not go back to read anything until just now. Alright, we're back to it. Do you know why the Hammond Foundation supports so much dinosaur research? Of course, it's because old John Hammond is a dinosaur nut. You've met Hammond? Grant shrugged, once or twice. He comes here for brief visits. He's quite elderly, you know. And eccentric, the way rich people sometimes are, but always very enthusiastic. Why? Well, Morris said, the Hammond Foundation is actually a rather mysterious organization. He pulled out a Xerox world map marked with, he pulled out a Xerox world map marked with red dots. He passed it to Grant. These are the digs of the foundation financed last year. Notice anything odd about them? Montana, Alaska, Canada, Sweden. They're all sites to the north. There's nothing below the 45th parallel. Morris pulled out more maps. It's the same, year after year. Dinosaur projects to the south, in Utah or Colorado or Mexico, they never get funded. The Hammond Foundation only supports cold weather digs. We'd like to know why. Grant shuffled through the maps quickly. If it was true that the Foundation only supported cold weather digs, then it was strange behavior because some of the best dinosaur researchers were working in hot climates, and there are other puzzles, Morris said, cutting him off. For example, what is the relationships of dinosaurs to amber? Amber? Yes, it's the hard yellow resin of dried up trees. I know what it is, Grant said, but why are you asking about it? Because, Morris said, over the last 5 years, Hammond has purchased enormous quantities of amber in America, Europe, and Asia, including many pieces of museum-quality jewelry. The Foundation has spent $17 million on amber. They now possess the largest privately held stock of this material in the world. I don't get it, Grant said. Neither does anybody else. As far as we can tell, it doesn't make any sense at all. Amber is easily synthesized. It has no commercial or defense value. There's no reason to stockpile it, but Hammond has done just that over many years. Amber, Grant said again, shaking his head. And what about his island in Costa Rica, Morris continued. 10 years ago, the Hammond Foundation leased an island from the government in Costa Rica, supposedly to set up a biological reserve. I don't know anything about that, Grant said, frowning. I haven't been able to find out much, Morris said. The island is 100 miles off the west coast. It's very rugged, and it's in an area of the ocean where the combination of the winds and current make it almost perpetually covered in fog. They used to call it Cloud Island, Isla Nublar. Apparently, the Costa Ricans were amazed that anybody would want it. Morris searched in his briefcase. The reason I mentioned it, he said, is that according to the records, you were paid a consultant's fee in connection with this island. I was? Grant asked. Morris passed a sheet of paper to Grant. It was the Xerox of a check issued in March 1984 from InGen Inc., made out to Alan Grant in the amount of $12,000, and at the lower corner the check was marked Consultant Services, Costa Rica Juvenile Hyperspace. Oh, sure, Grant said. I remember that. It was weird as hell, but I remember it, and I didn't have anything to do with an island. Alan Grant had found the first clutch of dinosaur eggs in Montana in 1979, and many, many more in the next 2 years, but he hadn't gotten around to publishing his findings until 1983. His paper, with its report of a herd of 10,000 duck-billed dinosaurs living along the shore of the vast inland sea, building communal nests of eggs in the mud, raising their infants in the dinosaur herd, made Grant a celebrity overnight. The notion of maternal instincts in giant dinosaurs and the drawings of cute babies poking their snouts out of the eggs had appeal all around the world. Grant was besieged with requests for interviews, lectures, books. Characteristically, he turned them all down, wanting only to continue his excavations. But it was during these frantic days of the mid-1980s that he was approached by the InGen Corporation with a request for consulting services. Have you heard of InGen before? Morris asked. No. How'd they contact you? Telephone call. It was a man named Gennaro or Giannino or something like that. Morris nodded. Donald Gennaro, he said. He's the legal counsel for InGen. Anyway, he wanted to know about the eating habits of dinosaurs, and he offered me a fee to draw up a paper for him. Grant drank his beer, set the can on the floor. Gennaro was particularly interested in young dinosaurs, infants and juveniles, what they ate. I guess he thought I would know about that. Did you? Well, not really, no. I told him that. We'd found lots of skeletal material, but we have very little dietary data. But Gennaro said he knew we hadn't published everything, and he wanted whatever he had. And he offered a very large fee, $50,000. Morris took out a tape recorder and set it on the end table. You mind? No, go ahead. So, Gennaro telephoned you in 1984. What happened then? Well, Grant said, you see our operation here. $50,000 would support 2 full summers of digging. I told him I'd do what I could. So you agreed to prepare a paper for him? Yes, on the dietary habits of juvenile dinosaurs. Yes. You met Gennaro? No, just on the phone. Did Gennaro say why he wanted this information? Yes, he was planning a museum for children and he wanted to feature baby dinosaurs. He said he was hiring a number of academic consultants and named them. They were paleontologists like me, a mathematician from Texas named Ian Malcolm, and a couple of ecologists, a system analysis. Good group. Morris nodded, making notes. So you accepted the consultancy? Oh, I must have skipped a page. Hold on a second here, lads. Yes, I agreed to send him a summary of our work, what we knew about the habits of duck-billed hadrosaurs we found. What kind of information did you send? Everything. Nesting behavior, territorial ranges, feeding behavior, social behavior, everything. And how did Gennaro respond? He kept calling and calling, sometimes in the middle of the night. Would the dinosaurs eat this? Would they eat that? Should their exhibit include this? I could never understand why he was so worked up. I mean, I think dinosaurs are important too, but not that important. They've been dead 65 million years. You'd think his calls could wait until morning. I see, Morris said. And the $50,000? Grant shook his head. I got tired of Gennaro and called the whole thing off. We settled up for $12,000. That must have been around the middle of '85. Oh, One True Goose, thank you so much for the donation, man. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you very much, Goose. Give me some W's for Goose in the chat, please. Can I get some W's for Goose in both Twitch and YouTube? I'm sorry, casual guy. I know. Some parts of the book are a little slower. But it's got the early parts of the book are important, so that way we can build up to the end. And once again, thank you very much to the one true Goose. All those W's are for you, Goose. We settled up for 12,000. That must have been about the middle of 85. Morris made note. And InGen? Any other contact with them? Not since 85. And when did the Hammond Foundation begin to fund your research? I'd have to look, but it was around then, mid-80s. And you know Hammond is just a Richard Dinosaur enthusiast? Yes. Morris made another note. Look, Grant said, if the EPA is so concerned about John Hammond, EPA, and what he's doing, the dinosaur sites in the north, the amber purchases, the island in Costa Rica, then why don't you just ask him about it? At the moment, we can't. Why not, Grant said. Because we don't have any evidence of wrongdoing, Morris said. But personally, I think it's clear that John Hammond is evading the law. So, this is the first indication that we get through the entire book that Hammond is the bad guy, right? Like, don't get me wrong, Grant is defending him, and I don't blame Grant for defending him, because Grant doesn't know everything. But Morris is portrayed here kind of like a snobby kid, right? But he's actually right. He is correct on a lot of the things he says here about Hammond, and on his opinion that Hammond is evading the law, because that's, at the end of the day, that's true. And I think it's really, like, good foreshadowing, because a lot of people, especially if you watch the movie before reading the books, would genuinely just be like, screw this guy. Like, who likes him? He's picking on Hammond. Like, who wants to pick on John Hammond, right? I was first contacted, Morris explained, by the Office of Technology Transfer. The OTT monitors shipments of American technology which might have military significance. They called to say that InGen had two areas of possible illegal technology transfer. First, InGen shipped 3 Cray XMPs to Costa Rica. InGen characterized it as transfer within corporate divisions, but said that they weren't for resale. But OTT couldn't imagine why the hell somebody'd need that kind of power in Costa Rica. 3 Crays, Grant said. Is that a kind of computer? So, before we go on, Crays are revealed to be... Oh man, my voice cracked there. Crays are revealed to be a type of computer in the book. I don't know if Crays were a real-life computer, but computer technology was way different in 1990 than it is now. So, like, that's one thing you got to keep in mind is computers in this book might not make sense to a lot of you because it's from an older generation, basically. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. At least. Alright, anyways. 3 Crays, Grant said. Is that a kind of computer? Morris nodded. A very powerful supercomputer. To put it in perspective, 3 Crays represent more computing power than any other privately held company in America, and InGen sent the machines to Costa Rica. You have to wonder why. I give up, Grant said. Why? Nobody knows, and the hoods are even more worrisome. Morris continued. Hoods are automated gene sequencers, machines that work out the genetic code by themselves. They're so new that they haven't been put into the restricted lists yet. But any genetic engineering lab is likely to have one if it can afford the $500,000 price tag. He flipped through his notes. Well, it seems that InGen shipped 24 hood sequencers to their island in Costa Rica. Again, they said it was a transfer within divisions and not an export, Morris said. There wasn't much that OTT could do. They're not officially concerned with use, but InGen was obviously setting up one of the most powerful genetic engineering facilities in the world in an obscure Central American country, a country with no regulations. That kind of thing has happened before. There had already been cases of the American bioengineering companies moving to another country so that they would not be hampered by regulations and rules. The most flagrant, Morris explained, was the Biosyn rabies case. So this is also our first introduction to Biosyn in the novels. In In 1986, Genetic Biocin Corporation of Cupertino tested a bioengineered rabies virus on rabies vaccine on a farm in Chile. They didn't inform the government of Chile or the farm workers involved. They simply released the vaccine. The vaccine consisted of a live rabies virus, genetically modified to be non-virulent, but the virulence hadn't been tested. Biocin didn't know whether the virus could still cause rabies or not. Even worse, the virus had been modified. Ordinarily, you couldn't contract rabies unless you were bitten by the animal, but Biocin modified the rabies virus to cross the pulmonary alveoli, and you could get infected by just inhaling it. Biocin staffers brought this live rabies virus down to Chile in a carry-on bag in a commercial airline flight. Morris often wondered what would have happened if the capsule had broken open during the flight. Everybody on the plane might have been infected with rabies. Man. Alright, hold on. Before I continue, definitely need a thing of water. You can tell when my voice starts going like that. Just give me one moment. Oh. Everybody okay? Everybody alright? How's everybody doing in here? You got a lot of people watching tonight. I just wanted to say, everybody who's still in here on YouTube and on TikTok, thank you guys all very much. Or not TikTok. Everybody on YouTube and on Twitch, thank you all very much for joining me in this read-through tonight. I hope everybody's enjoying. And don't worry, you will. You'll get some more. I'm not done here. I don't know if you want a hair reveal, man. That's a bit. We got 8 viewers still over in the Twitch chat too. Thank every single one of you for watching. I appreciate you guys more than you know. Taldas, I'm glad you managed to catch this too. Thank you for joining me tonight for this. All right. Just got to take one more sip here. I'm not going to put a beard on my dinosaur. Why would I do that? You put the lime in the coconut. All right. And we're back once again. All right, folks. Where were we? Biocin. It was outrageous. It was irresponsible. It was criminally negligent. But no action was taken against Biocin. Sorry, my hair is like getting... I've got long hair, so it's getting kind of caught in my mask a little bit. It was criminally negligent, but no actions were taken against Biocin. The Chilean farmers who unwillingly risked their lives were ignorant peasants. The government of Chile had an economic crisis to worry about, and the American authorities had no jurisdiction. So Louis Dodson, the geneticist responsible for the test, was still working at Biocin. Biocin was still as reckless as ever, and other American companies were hurrying to set up facilities in foreign countries that lack sophistication about genetic research. Countries that perceived genetic engineering to be like any other high-tech development, and thus welcomed it to their lands unaware of the dangers it posed. So that's why we began our investigation of InGen, Morris said, about 3 weeks ago. And what have you actually found? Grant asked. Not much, Morris admitted. When I go back to San Francisco, we'll probably have to close the investigation. And I think I'm about finished here. He started packing up his briefcase. By the way, what does juvenile hyperspace mean? That's just a fancy label for my report, Grant said. Hyperspace is a term for multidimensional space, like a three-dimensional tic-tac-toe. If you were to take all the behaviors of an animal, its eating and movement and sleeping, you could plot the whole animal within a multidimensional space. Some paleontologists refer to the behavior of an animal as occurring in an ecological hyperspace. Juvenile hyperspace would refer to the behavior of juvenile dinosaurs, if you wanted to be as pretentious as possible. At the far end of the trailer, the phone rang. Elliot answered it. She said, "He's in a meeting right now. Could he call you back?" Morris snapped his briefcase shut and said, "Thanks for your help, and the beer," he said. "No problem," Grant said. Grant walked with Morris down the trailer to the door at the far end. Morris said, "Did Hammond ever ask about any physical materials from your site? Bones or eggs or anything like that?" "No," Grant said. "Dr. Sattler mentioned you do some genetic work here." "Well, not exactly. When we remove fossils that are broken or for some other reason not suitable for museum preservation, we send the bones out to a lab to grind them up and try to extract proteins for us. Those proteins are then identifiable and the report is sent back to us." "Which lab is that?" "Medical Biological Services in Salt Lake." "How'd you choose them?" "Competitive bids." "The lab has nothing to do with InGen?" Morris asked. "Not that I know of." They came out of the door of the trailer, and Grant opened it and felt the rush of hot air from the outside. Morris paused to put on his sunglasses. "One last thing," Morris said. "Suppose InGen wasn't really making a museum exhibit. Is there anything else they could have done with the information in the report you gave them?" Grant laughed. "Sure. They could feed a baby hadrosaur." Morris laughed too. "A baby hadrosaur. That'd be something to see. How big were they?" "About so," Grant said, holding his hands about 6 inches apart. "Squirrel size." "And about how long before they become full grown?" 3 years, give or take." Morris held out his hand. "Well, thanks again for your help." "Take it easy driving back," Grant said. He watched for a moment as Morris walked back towards his car and then closed the trailer door. "What did you think?" Grant said. Ellie shrugged. "Naive." "You like the part where John Hammond is the evil arch-villain?" Grant laughed. "Hammond's about as sinister as Walt Disney." "By the way, who called?" "Oh, it was some woman named Alice Levin. She works at Columbia Medical Center. You know her?" Grant shook his head. "No." "Well, it was something about identifying some remains. She wants you to call her back right away." And that was the end of that chapter. Oh, Taldas! Holy cannoli. Taldas, thank you so much for the donation. Not only that, but an incredible message too. Honestly, that made my night alone. Taldas, thank you so very much. Chat, give me some major W's for Taldas. Thank you so much, and I hope that you will have the absolute best night and that you're enjoying this video. And remember, Taldas, if you're ever feeling down, I understand, and I've been in the same boat, and you're always making the world a little better and brighter yourself. Thank you very much for the donation, and I appreciate it more than I can really put to words. Thank you very much once again, Taldas. And everyone in both chats, make sure some major W's for Taldas, please. Thank you very much to everyone in Twitch for immediately hopping on that, and everybody on YouTube. I see you guys too. Once again, thank you very much, Taldas, for the $20. Let's get back into this, because this next part's very interesting. We get to kind of see the beginning of where we learn that Hammond might not be the best guy. She wants you to call her back right away. Okay, I already finished that part. Perfect. Ellie Sattler brushed a strand of blonde hair back from her face and turned her attention to the acid baths. She had 6 in a row, at molar strengths between 5 to 30%. She had to keep an eye on the stronger solutions because they would eat through the limestone and begin to erode the actual fossils. And infant dinosaur bones were so very fragile. She marveled that they had been preserved at all after 80 million years. She listened idly as Grant said, "Miss Levin, this is Alan Grant. What's about this, you have a what? A what?" He began to laugh. "Oh, I doubt that very much, Miss Levin. No, I really don't have time. Well, I take a look at it, but I can pretty much guarantee it's a basilisk lizard. But, yes, you can do that. All right. Send it now, Grant." Grant hung up and shook his head. "These people." Ellie said, What's all this about?" "Some lizard she's trying to identify," Grant said. She's going to fax me an x-ray." He walked over to the fax and... Umbra, thank you for the subscription. Very much appreciated. Some fax for me. She's going to fax me an x-ray. He walked over to the fax and waited as the transmissions came through. "Incidentally, I've got a new find for you. A good one." "Yeah?" she asked. Grant nodded. "Found it just before that kid showed up. On South Hill, Horizon 4. Infant velociraptor. Jaw and complete dentition. So there's no question about identity. And the site looks undisturbed. We might even get a full skeleton." "That's fantastic," Ellie said. "How young?" "About 2 months. Maybe 4 months at the most. And it's definitely a velociraptor?" "Definitely," Grant said. "Maybe our luck has finally turned." All right, pause here real quick just to make a quick note. They're talking about velociraptor here in the time span about 80 million years ago. Velociraptor in both the book and the films is based off of Deinonychus, which is a very specific species of Dromaeosauraptor. Deinonychus did live about 80 million years ago. I don't think they lived all the way as far north as Montana, but I'm not positive on that. I'd have to double check their range. But I do know for sure that they were not velociraptors, obviously. They end up later calling this American species Velociraptor anteropus, which is just... Deinonychus' name is Deinonychus anteropus. So that would be, therefore, its main, It's a Deinonychus, it's not a Velociraptor, but they're going to call it Velociraptor throughout the book. Anyways. For the last 2 years at Snakewater, the team had excavated only duck-billed hadrosaurs. They already had evidence for vast herds of these grazing dinosaurs, roaming the Cretaceous plains in groups of 10 or 20,000, as buffalo would later roam. But increasingly, the questions that faced them was, where were the predators? They expected predators to be rare, of course. Studies of predator-prey populations in the game peak of Africa and India suggested that, roughly speaking, there was one predatory carnivore for every 400 herbivores. That meant a herd of 10,000 duckbills would support only 25 tyrannosaurs, so it was unlikely that they would find the remains of a large predator. But where were the smaller predators? Snakewaters had dozens of nesting sites. In some places, the ground were literally covered with fragments of dinosaur eggshells, and many of the small dinosaurs ate eggs. Animals like Dromaeosaurus, Oviraptor, Velociraptor, and Silurus, predators 3 to 6 feet tall, must have been found here in abundance, but they had discovered none so far. Perhaps this Velociraptor skeleton did mean their luck had changed. And an infant. Ellie knew that one of Grant's dreams was to study infant rearing... Speaking too fast there. Ellie knew that one of Grant's dreams was to study infant rearing behavior in carnivorous dinosaurs, as he had already studied the behavior of herbivores. Perhaps this was the first step towards that dream. "You must be pretty excited," Ellie said. Grant didn't answer, and I said, "You must be pretty excited." "My God," Grant said. He was just simply staring at the facts. Sometimes you gotta stare at the facts, you know what I mean? The dino fact. No, I'm kidding. But this is a big turning point in the novel, because this is basically the linchpin that convinces Alan that something's going on and that he should get involved to a certain degree. Deinonychus is very much still a cool dinosaur. You're 100% right about that, soldier. That reminded me of Karlach for some reason, just saying soldier there. If you guys don't play Baldur's Gate and you haven't heard Karlach, you definitely should do that. Get on that. Karlach is one of my favorite characters in video game media recently, and it's not just because she's hot. Ellie looked over Grant's shoulder at the x-rays and breathed out slowly. You think it's an ammassicus? Yes, Grant said, or a triassicus. The skeleton is so light. But it's no lizard, she said. No. This is not a lizard. No three-toed lizard has walked on this planet for 200 million years. Grant was perplexed. Ellie's first thoughts was that she was looking at a hoax. An ingenious, skillful hoax, but a hoax nonetheless. Every biologist knew that the threat of a hoax was omnipresent. The most famous hoax, the Piltdown Man, had gone undetected for 40 years, and its perpetrator was still unknown. More recently, the distinguished astronomer Fred Hoyle had claimed that a fossil winged dinosaur, Archaeopteryx, on display at the British Museum was a fraud, but it was later shown to be genuine. The essence of a successful hoax was that it presented scientists with what they expected to see, and to Ellie's eye, the X-ray image of the lizard was exactly correct. The three-toed foot was well balanced, with the medial claw the smallest. The medial claw is that fourth claw that's like, you always see it on the back of a dinosaur's foot, or theropod dinosaur foot. It's kind of like the tiny little fourth toe that hangs in the back there. The bony remnants of the fourth and fifth toes were located up near the metatarsal joint. The tibia was strong and considerably longer than the femur. At the hip, the acetabellum was complete. The tail showed 45 vertebrae. It was a Procompsognathus. Could this X-ray be faked? I don't know, Grant said, but it's almost impossible to fake an X-ray. And Procompsognathus is an obscure animal. Even people familiar with dinosaurs have never heard of it before. Ellie read the note. Specimen acquired on the beach of Cabo Blanco, July 16th. Apparently, a howler monkey was eating the animal, and this was all that was recovered. Oh, and it says the lizard attacked a little girl. I doubt that, Grant said, but perhaps. Procompsognathus was so small and light, and we assumed it must be a scavenger, only feeding off dead creatures. And you can tell the size, he measured quickly, is about 20 centimeters at the hips, which means that the full animal would only be about a foot tall, about as big as a chicken. Even a child would look pretty fearsome to it. It might bite an infant, but not a child. Ellie frowned at the X-ray image. You think this could really be a legitimate rediscovery? Like the coelacanth? Maybe, Grant said. The coelacanth was a 5-foot-long fish long thought to have died about 65 million years ago, until a specimen was pulled from the ocean in 1938. But there were other examples. The Australian mountain pygmy possum was known only from fossils until a live one was found in a garbage can in Melbourne. A 10,000-year-old fossil fruit bat from New Guinea was described by a zoologist who not long afterwards received a living specimen in the mail. But could it be real, she persisted. What about the age? Grant nodded. The age is a problem. Most rediscovered animals were rather recent additions to the fossil record, 10 or 20,000 years old. Some were a few million years old, and in the case of the coelacanth, 65 million years old. But the specimen they were looking at was much, much older than that. Dinosaurs had died out in the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago. They had flourished as the dominant life form in the Jurassic, and 190 million years ago. And they had first appeared in the Triassic, roughly 220 million years ago. Flatpick, thank you for the follow on Twitch. Much appreciated. I very highly appreciate anybody who joins me on Twitch at the moment. Again, I'm not nearly as big on Twitch, so if you folks wouldn't mind helping me out and following me on there too, if you have a Twitch account, I'd highly appreciate you. It was during the early Triassic period that Procompsognathus had lived, a time so distant that our planet didn't even look the same. All the continents were joined together in a single landmass called Pangaea, which extended from the north to the south pole, a vast continent of ferns and forests, with a few large deserts in between. The Atlantic Ocean was a narrow lake between what would become Africa and Florida. The air was denser, the land was warmer. There were hundreds of active volcanoes, and it was in this environment that Procomsognathus lived. Well, Ellie said, we know animals have survived. Crocodiles are basically Triassic animals living in the present. Sharks are Triassic, so we know it's happened before. Grant nodded. And the thing is, how else do we explain it? It's either a fake, which I doubt, or else it's a rediscovery. What else could it be? The phone rang. Alice leaving again, Grant said. Let's see if she'll send us the actual specimen. He'd answered it and looked at Ellie, surprised. Yes, I'll hold for Mr. Hammond. Yes, of course. Hammond? What does he want? Ellie said. Grant shook his head and then said into the phone, Yes, Mr. Hammond, yes, it's good to hear your voice too. Yes, he looked at Ellie. Oh, you did? Oh, yes, is that right? He cupped his hand over the mouthpiece instead, still as eccentric as ever. You've got to hear this. Grant pushed the speaker button, and Ellie heard a raspy old man's voice speaking rapidly. Hell of an annoyance from some EPA fellow. From some EPA fellow. Seems to have gone off half-cock, all on his own, running around the country talking to people and stirring up things. I don't suppose anybody's come to see you out there. As a matter of fact, Grant said, someone did come to see me. Hammond snorted. I was afraid of that. Smart-ass kid named Morris? Yes, his name is Morris, Grant said. He's going to see all our consultants, Hammond said. He went to see Ian Malcolm the other day, you know, the mathematician in Texas. That's the first I knew of it. We're having one hell of a time getting a handle on this thing. It's typical of the way the government operates. There isn't any complaint, there isn't any charge, just harassment from some kid who's unsupervised and is running around at the taxpayer's expense. Did he bother you? Disrupt your work? No, he didn't bother me, Mr. Hammond. Well, that's too bad, in a way, Hammond said, because I'd try and get an injunction to stop him if he had. And as it is, I had our lawyers call all over at the EPA to find out what the hell their problem is. The head of the office claims he didn't know there wasn't any investigation. You figured that one out. Damn bureaucracy is all it is. Hell, I think the kid's trying to get down to Costa Rica, poke around, get onto our island. You know we have an island down there. No, Grant said, looking at Ellie. I didn't know. Oh, yes, we bought it and started our operation, 4 or 5 years ago now. I forget exactly. Called Isla Nublar. Big island, 100 miles offshore. Going to be a biological preserve, you know. Wonderful place. Tropical jungle. You know, you ought to see it, Dr. Grant. Sounds interesting, Dr. Grant said, but actually, it's almost finished now, you know, Hammond said, cutting him off. I've sent you some material about it. Did you get my material? No, but we're pretty far from... Maybe it'll come today. Look it over. The island's just beautiful. It's got everything. We've been in construction now 30 months. You can imagine. Big park. Opens in September next year. You really ought to go see it. It sounds wonderful, Mr. Hammond, but as a matter of fact, Hammond said, I'm going to insist you see it, Dr. Grant. I knew you'd find it right up your alley. You'd find it fascinating. I'm in the middle of, Grant said. Say, I'll tell you what, Hammond said, as if the idea had just occurred to him. I'm having some people who consulted for us go down there this weekend. Spend a few days and look it over. At our expense, of course. It'd be terrific if you gave us your opinions. I couldn't possibly, Grant said. Oh, just for a weekend, Hammond said, with the irritating, cheery persistence of an old man. That's all I'm talking about, Dr. Grant. I wouldn't want to interrupt your work. I know how important that work is. Believe me, I know that. Never interrupt your work. But you could hop down there this weekend and be back by Monday. No, I couldn't. I've just found a new skeleton and... Yes, fine, but I still think you should come, Hammond said, not really listening to him. And we've just received some evidence for a very puzzling and remarkable find, which seems to be a living Procomsognathid. A what? Hammond said, slowing down. I didn't quite get that. You said a living Procomsognathid? A living Procomsognathid? Alright, hold on. I need water once more. Give me a second. Oof. I apologize for that, folks. But water is good for you, so always make sure you're drinking some water. Oh, your grandpa came from Costa Rica? That's awesome. Colorless, honestly, I believe you there, because the thing is, Hammond is not a very good negotiator. Taldas, thank you for the follow, much appreciated. Oh wait, Taldas, you came over from YouTube? Thank you. Much appreciated. I always, like, I'm extra thankful when someone from multiple platforms follows me on another one. It shows that you care a lot about my content, and honestly, that makes me kind of warm inside. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't even know how to fully react. I appreciate you, Taldas. Hi, Nell. Hello, everybody just joining us, and I hope everybody who's leaving us have a good night. Give me one more second to get another couple sips of this water in. Yeah, I got a lot of new people in here tonight, Donorama. A lot of folks wanted to listen to the Jurassic Park novel, and I don't blame them. So I hope I'm entertaining you guys enough. All right, we're coming back to it here. Give me just a moment. And boom, back with the live scene. Sorry I'm taking so many pauses tonight, folks. Reading is actually a lot harder than just playing video games in this mask for some reason. So, back to it. A what? Hammond said, slowing down. I didn't quite get that. You said a living procompsognathed? That's right, Grant said. It's a biological specimen, a partial fragment of an animal collected from Central America. A living animal. You don't say, Hammond said, slower. A living animal. How extraordinary. Yes, Grant said. We think so, too. So you see, this isn't the time for me to be leaving Central America, did you say? Yes. Where in Central America is it from? Do you know? A beach called Cabo Blanco. I don't know exactly where. I see. I see, Hammond said, clearing his throat. And where did this specimen arrive in your hands? Just today. Today, I see. Today, I see. Yes. Hammond cleared his throat again. Grant looked at Ellie and mouthed, "What's going on?" Flat pick that... Wait. Did it inform me twice about... Okay. Well, not sure why it took such a delayed response to show me Taldas at sub, but thank you once again, Taldas. What's going on? Ellie shook her head. Sounds upset. Grant mouthed, "See if Morris is still here." She went to the window and looked out, but Morris's car was gone. She turned back and shrugged her shoulders. On the speaker, Hammond coughed. Dr. Grant, have you told anybody about the specimen yet? No. Good, good. That's good. Well, yes. I'll tell you frankly, Dr. Grant, I'm having just a little problem about this island. This EPA thing is coming at just the wrong time. How's that? Grant said. Well, we've had our problems and some delays. Let's just say that I'm under a little pressure here, and I'd like you to look at this island for me. Give me your opinion. I'll be paying you the usual weekend consultant rate of $20,000 a day. That'd be $60,000 for 3 days. And if you can spare Dr. Sattler, she'll go with the same rate. We need a botanist, too. What do you say? Ellie looked at Grant and said, Well, Mr. Hammond, that much money would fully finance our expeditions for the next 2 summers. Good, good, Hammond said blandly. He seemed distracted now, his thoughts elsewhere. I want this to be easy. Now I'm sending the corporate jet to pick you up at the private airfield east of Chato. You know the one I mean? It's only about 2 hours drive from where you are now. You be there at 5 p.m. tomorrow, and I'll be waiting for you. Take you right down. Can you and Dr. Sattler make that plane? I guess we can. Good. Pack lightly. You don't need passports, and I'm looking forward to it. I'll see you all tomorrow, Hammond said, and he hung up. And that was the end of that chapter? For some reason, I thought there was something afterwards. So, Hammond, obviously, he knows that something's up. He knows something's going on. I'm not going to spoil too much for you, but obviously he's trying to genuinely hide something. And even Alan, who just said, man, you can't really say John Hammond's evil, is now kind of suspicious of something going on. So again, definitely something to keep in mind. Cheeses 123, thank you for the follow, much appreciated. I don't think I ever said what page, because we're just going to kind of see how we're going. I'll let you know what page we're on, at least in my version of the book, once we actually get closer to the end here. We'll probably go for another maybe hour, maybe half hour. We'll see how you guys are feeling once we finish the next couple chapters or so. Let me just double check the Twitch here. It's going to be a bit before they get to Nublar. I'm not sure if they'll get to Nublar tonight, but we'll see how far we can get. This next chapter is titled Cohen, Swain, and Ross. And these are, you'll see. Midday was streamed into the San Francisco law offices of Cohen, Swain, and Ross, giving the room a cheerfulness that Donald Gennaro did not feel. He listened on the phone and looked at his boss, Daniel Ross, cold as the Undertaker in his dark pinstripe suit. I understand, John. And Grant agreed to come? Good, good. Yes, that sounds fine to me. My congratulations, John. He hung up the phone and turned to Ross. We can't trust Hammond anymore. He's under too much pressure. The EPA is investigating him, he's behind schedule on his Costa Rican resort, and the investors are getting nervous. There have been too many rumors of problems down there. Too many workmen have died, and now this business about a living pro-cum whatever down on the mainland. What does that mean? Ross said. Maybe nothing, Gennaro said. But Hamachi is one of our principal investors. I got a report last week from Hamachi's representative in San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica. According to the report, some new kind of lizard is biting children on the coast. Ross blinked. A new lizard? Yes. We can't screw around with this. We've got to inspect that island right away. I've asked Hammond to arrange independent site inspection every week for the next 3 weeks. What does Hammond say? He insists that nothing is wrong with the island. Claims he has all of these security precautions. But you don't believe him, Ross said. No, Gennaro said. I don't. Donald Gennaro had come to Cohen, Swain, and Ross from a background in investment banking. Cohen, Swain's high-tech clients frequently needed capitalization, and Gennaro helped them find the money. One of his first assignments back in 1982 had been to accompany John Hammond while the old man, then nearly 70, put together the funding to start the InGen Corporation. They eventually raised about $1 billion, and Gennaro remembered it as a wild ride. Naomi Malone, thank you for the subscription. Hammond's a dreamer, Gennaro said. A potentially dangerous dreamer, Ross replied. We should have never gotten involved. What is our financial position? The firm owns 5%, Gennaro said. General or limited? General. Ross shook his head. We should never have done that. It seemed wise at the time, Gennaro said. Hell, it was 8 years ago. We took it in lieu of some fees. And if you remembered, Hammond's plan was extremely speculative. He was really pushing the envelope. Nobody really thought he could pull it off. But apparently he has, Ross said. In any case, I agree that the inspection is overdue. What about your site experts? I'm starting with experts Hammond already hired as consultants early in the project. Gennaro tossed a list onto Ross' desks. First is a group of paleontologists, a paleobotanist, and a mathematician. They go down this weekend, and I'll go with them. Will they tell you the truth? I think so. None of them have much to do with the island, and one of them, the mathematician Ian Malcolm, was openly hostile towards the project from the start. Insisted that it would never work, could never work. And who else? Just a technical person. The computer system analyst reviews the park's computers and fixes some bugs. He should be there by Friday morning. Fine, Ross said. You're making the arrangements? Hammond asked to place the calls himself. I think he wants to pretend that he's not in trouble, that it's just a social intervention, showing off his island. Why is it showing you so late after you subscribed? I don't know, but I still appreciate you, cheeses. Showing off his island. All right, Ross said, but just make sure it happens. Stay on top of it. I want this Costa Rican situation resolved within a week. Ross got up and walked out of the room. Gennaro dialed, heard the whining hiss of the radiophone. Then he heard a voice say, Grant here. Hi, Dr. Grant. This is Donald Gennaro. I'm the general counsel for InGen. We talked a few years back. I don't know if you remember. Grant cut him off. I remember. Well, Gennaro said, I just got off the phone with John Hammond, who tells me the good news that you're coming down to our island in Costa Rica. Yes, Grant said. I guess we're going down there tomorrow. Well, I just want to extend my thanks for you for doing this on such short notice. Everybody at InGen appreciates it. We've asked Ian Malcolm, who like you was one of the early consults, to come down and talk as well. He's the mathematician at UT in Austin. John Hammond mentioned that, Grant said. Well, good, Gennaro said. And I'll be coming too, as a matter of fact. By the way, the specimen you had found of Procompsognathus, Grant said. Yes. Do you have the specimen with you, Dr. Grant? The actual specimen? No, Grant said. I've only seen an x-ray. The specimen is in New York. A woman from Columbia University called me. Well, I wonder if you could give me details on that. Then I can run down that specimen for Mr. Hammond, who's very excited about it. I'm sure you want to see the actual specimen, too. Perhaps I can even get it delivered to the island while you're all down there. Grant gave him the information. Well, that's fine, Dr. Grant. My regards to Dr. Sattler. I look forward to meeting you and him tomorrow. Gennaro hung up. So, a couple things to note there. Obviously, Gennaro's a lawyer. That's what he was in the film, too. But in the film, they combine the characters of Ed Regis and Gennaro into one, right? Basically make them the same, but they're very different in the books. Regis is a lawyer and everything like that, but he's not. He's genuinely working for the interest of his company, not necessarily for Hammond. I hope that kind of makes sense. Alright, folks. I think one more chapter here, and we can probably finish up for the night. What time is it? About 9:30? Maybe two more chapters. We'll see where we're at. Casual guy, don't worry. We'll be done pretty soon here. And these will still stay up on both Twitch and YouTube for a couple days at least. Crocs Rule, thank you very much for subscribing. Give me some big W's for Crocs. And then someone respond on here. Oh man, it's 2:30 for you, Casual. And I definitely don't blame you if you do end up going to bed there, bud. Alright. Let's bring that back up. This next chapter is called Plans. This just came, Ellie said the next day, walking to the back of the trailer with a thick manila envelope. One of the kids brought it back from town. It's from Hammond. Grant noticed the blue and white InGen logo as he tore open the paper envelope. Inside, there was no cover letter, just a bound stack of paper. Pulling it out, he discovered it was blueprints. They were reduced, forming a thick book. The cover was marked. Isla Nublar Resort Guest Facilities. Full set staff Safari Lodge. Staff Safari Lodge. Sorry. Reading for a long time out loud is something I haven't done in quite some time. So, so basically they just got sent some blueprints. What the hell is that? Grant said. As he flipped open the book, a sheet of paper fell out. Dear Alan and Ellie, as you can imagine, we don't have much in the way of formal promotional materials yet, but this should give you some idea of the Isla Nublar project. I think it's very exciting. Looking forward to discussing this with you. Hope you can join us. Regards, John. That was a letter from Hammond, obviously. I don't get it, Grant said. He flipped through the sheets. These are architectural plans. He turned to the top of the sheets. So, just so you guys can kind of see what's going on here. It's this here in particular that he's talking about. This page here. And it's the start of some charts. Basically, it's showing like people who were involved in that project on that first chart there and what they were making. Grant turned to the plans themselves. They were stamped Industrial Secrets, Do Not Copy, and Confidential Work Product, Not for Distribution. Each sheet was numbered, and at the top, these plans represent the confidential creations of InGen Inc. You must have signed document 1124A, or you risk prosecution. Looks pretty paranoid to me, Grant said. Maybe there's a reason. The next page was a topographical map. It showed Isla Nublar and inverted as an inverted teardrop, bulging at the north, tapering at the south. The island was 8 miles long, and the map divided it into several large sections. The northern section was marked Visitor Area, and it contained structures marked Visitor Arrival, Visitor Center and Administration, Power, Desalination and Support, Hammond Resort, and Safari Lodge. Grant could see the outline of a swimming pool, the rectangles of a tennis court, and the round squiggles that represented planting and shrubbery. Looks like a resort, all right, Ellie said. They followed detail sheets from the Safari Lodge itself. In the elevation sketches, the lodge looked dramatic, a long, low building with a series of pyramid slopes on the roof, but there was little about the other buildings in the visitor area. And the rest of the island was even more mysterious. As far as Grant could tell, it was mostly open space, a network of roads, tunnels, and outlying buildings, and a long, thin lake that appeared to be man-made, with concrete dams and barriers. But for the most part, the island was divided into big, curving areas with very little development at all. Each area was marked by codes, such as PROC, TRIC, OTHN. And again, these are little... I don't know if you can read them there, but just little codes representing different dinosaur names, basically. But I think they're like just starting to figure that out. Is there an explanation for the code? She said. Grant flipped the pages rapidly, but he couldn't find any. Maybe they took it out, she said. I'm telling you, paranoid. He looked at the big curving divisions and separated them one another by the network of roads. There were only 6 divisions on the whole island, and each division was separated from the road by a concrete moat. Outside each moat was a fence with a little lightning sign alongside it. That mystified them until they were finally able to figure out that meant the fences were electrified. That's odd, Ellie said. Electrified fences at a resort? Miles of them, Grant said. Electrified fences and moats together, and usually with a road just alongside them as well. Just like a zoo, Ellie said. They went back to the topographical map and looked closely at the contour lines. The roads had been placed oddly. The main road ran north-south, right through the central hills of the island, including one section of the road that seemed to literally cut into the side of a cliff above a river. It began to look as if there had been a deliberate effort to leave these open areas as big enclosures separated from the roads by moats and electrical fences. And the roads were raised up above the ground level so you could see over the fences. You know, Ellie said, some of these dimensions are enormous. Look at this. This concrete moat is 30 feet wide. That's like a military fortification. So are these buildings, Grant said. He had noticed that each open division had a few buildings, usually located in out-of-the-way corners. But the buildings were all concrete with thick walls. Inside view elevations They looked like concrete bunkers with small windows, like the Nazi pillboxes from old war movies. At that moment, they heard muffled explosion, and Grant put the papers aside. "Back to work," he said. Oh, just stretch a little bit real quick. Everybody enjoying yourself? Everybody having a good time so far? I completely understand. It's getting a little late, Cryptic. We're getting to that point. Fire! There was a slight vibration, and then yellow contour lines traced across the computer screen. This time, the resolution was perfect, and Alan Grant had a glimpse of the skeleton, beautifully defined as the long neck arced backwards. It was unquestionably an infant velociraptor, and it looked like it was imperfect. The screen went black. "I hate computers," Grant said, squinting in the sunlight. "What happened this time?" "Lost the integrator input," one of the kids said. "Just give me a minute." The kid bent to look at the tangle of wires going into the back of the battery-powered portable computer. They had set up the computer on a beer carton at the top of Hill 4, not far from the device they called Thumper. Grant sat down on the side of the hill and looked at his watch. He said to Ellie, "We're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way." One of the kids overheard, "Aw, Alan, look, I've got a plane to catch, and I want the fossil protected before I go." Once you began to expose a fossil, you had to continue or risk losing it. Visitors imagined the landscape of the Badlands to be unchanging, but in fact they were continuously eroding, literally right before your eyes. All day long you could hear the clatter of pebbles rolling down the crumbling hillside. And there was always the risk of a rainstorm. Even a brief shower would wash away a delicate fossil. Thus, Grant's partially exposed skeleton was at risk, and it had to be protected until he returned. Fossil protection ordinarily consisted of a tarp over the site and a trench around the perimeter to control water runoff. The question was how large a trench the Velociraptor fossil required. To decide that, they were trying to use computer-assisted sonic tomography, or CAST. This was a new procedure in which Thumper fired a soft lead slug into the ground, setting up shock waves that could be read by the computer and assembled into a kind of X-ray image of the hillside. They had been using it all summer with varying results. It's your boy. Thank you very much for the follow. Much appreciated. For those of you all watching and following me on Twitch, thank you all very much. It's a little bit extra love for those of you on Twitch just because I, again, appreciate you. But at the same time, I got to give love to my YouTube fellows as well because every single one of you is amazing. Every one of you. Friendly anime chick, you're getting a little wild there. You're getting a little wild there, don't you think? Maybe a little too friendly. Hey, it is here on YouTube. I don't know what Rumble is, if I'm being honest. What's Rumble? Chat, let me know in the comments or in anything else. What is Rumble? Like, let me know. All right. Where were we at? Thumper was 20 feet away now, a big silver box on wheels with an umbrella on top. It looked like an ice cream vendor's pushcart parked incongruously on the Badlands. Thumper had two youthful attendants loading the next soft lead pellet. So far, the CAST program merely located the extent of finds, helping Grant's team to dig more efficiently. But the kids claimed that within a few years, it would be possible to generate an image so detailed that excavation would be redundant. You could get a perfect image of the bones in 3 dimensions, and it promised a whole new era of archaeology without excavation. Which, What's the fun in that? Where's the fun in archaeology with no excavation? Have a good night, Dinorama. Sorry, I could not think of your name for whatever reason. Lila, you wildin' a little bit, Lila. But the kids claimed, okay. But none of that had happened yet, and the equipment that worked flawlessly in the university labs proved pitifully delicate and fickle in the field. Oh, that's interesting, time travel. I'll have to look into that. How much longer, Grant said. We got it now, Alan. It's not bad. Grant went to look at the computer screen. He saw the complete skeleton, traced in bright yellow, and it was indeed a young specimen. The outstanding characteristic of a velociraptor, the single-toed claw, which in full-grown animals was a curved, 6-inch long weapon capable of ripping open its prey, was in this infant no larger than a thorn on a rose bush. It was hardly visible at all on the screen, and Velociraptor was a lightly built dinosaur in any case, as an animal as fine-boned as a bird, and presumably as intelligent. Hold on. Can't see for some reason, not this for as well. Hold on. Yo, all y'all in here wildin'. Relax a little bit. Relax a little bit. Well, I guess you can't relax with some very violent dinosaurs, but... Alright, where are we at? Here, the skeleton appeared to be in perfect order, except that the head and neck were bent back towards the posterior. Such neck flexation was so common in fossils that some scientists had formulated a theory to explain it, suggesting that dinosaurs had become extinct because they had been poisoned by the evolving alkaloids in plants. The twisted neck was thought to signify the death agony of dinosaurs. Grant had finally put that one to rest by demonstrating that many species of birds and reptiles underwent a post-mortem construction of posterior neck ligaments which bent the head backwards in a characteristic way. It had nothing to do with the cause of death, so it had to do with the way the carcass dried in the sun. Grant saw that this particular skeleton had also been twisted laterally, so that the right leg and the foot were raised up above the backbone. It looks kind of distorted, one of the kids said. Yes, I do have The Lost World Gozo. It's actually in the same book here. I do play Minecraft sometimes, but I haven't in quite some time. Alright. It looks kind of distorted, one of the kids said, but I don't think that's because of the computer. No, Grant said, it's just time. Lots and lots of time. Grant knew that the people could not imagine geological time. Human life was lived on another scale of time entirely. An apple turned brown in a few days. Silverware turned black, an apple turned brown in a few minutes. Silverware turned black in a few days. A compost heap decayed in a season. A child grew up in a decade. None of these everyday human experiences prepared people to be able to imagine the meaning of 80 million years, the length of time that had passed since this little animal had died. In the classroom, Grant had tried different comparisons. If you imagine the human lifespan of 60 years was compressed to an hour, then 8 million years would still be 3,652 years, older than the pyramids. The Velociraptor had been dead a very long time. Doesn't look very fearsome, one of the kids said. He wasn't, Grant said, at least not until he grew up. Probably this baby had scavenged, feeding off the carcasses slain by the adults after the big animals had gorged themselves and lay basking in the sun. Carnivores could eat as much as 25% of their body weight. Carnivores could eat as much as 25% of their body weight in a single meal, and it meant that they made them sleepy afterwards. The baby would chitter and scramble over the indulgent, somnolent bodies of the adults and nip little bites from the dead animal. The babies were probably cute little animals. But an adult velociraptor was another matter entirely. Pound for pound, the velociraptor was probably one of the most rapacious dinosaurs that ever lived. Although relatively small, about 200 pounds and the size of a leopard, velociraptors were quick, intelligent, and vicious, able to attack with sharp jaws, powerful clawed forearms, and a devastating single claw on its foot. Velociraptor hunted in packs, and Grant thought it must have been a sight to see a dozen of these animals racing at full speed, leaping onto the back of a much larger dinosaur and tearing at the neck and slashing at the ribs and belly. "We're running out of time," Ellie said, bringing him back to the present. Grant gave instructions for the trench. From the computer image, they knew the skeleton lay in a relatively confined area. A ditch around 200 square meters would be sufficient. Meanwhile, Ellie laid out the tarp that covered the entire side of the hill. Grant helped her pound in the final stakes. "How did this baby velociraptor die?" one of the kids asked. "I doubt we'll know," Grant replied. "Infant mortality in the wild is high. In African parks, it runs 70% among some carnivores. It could have been anything: disease, separation from the group, or even attacked by an adult. We know these animals hunted in pack, but we don't know anything about their social behavior in a group." The students nodded. They had all studied animal behavior, and they knew, for example, that when a new male took over a lion pride, the first thing he did was kill all the other cubs. The reason was apparently genetic. The male had evolved to disseminate his genes as widely as possible, and by killing the other cubs, he brought all the females into heat so that he could impregnate them. It also prevented the females from wasting their time nurturing the offspring of another, weaker male. Perhaps the velociraptor hunting pack was also ruled by a dominant male. They knew so little about dinosaurs, Grant thought. After 150 years of research and excavation all around the world, they still knew almost nothing about what the dinosaurs had been really like. "We've got to go," Ellie said, "if we're going to get to Choto by 5. And that finishes that chapter there, folks. How's everybody feeling? How's everybody doing? You enjoying yourselves? How is Twitch doing? Let's check out over Twitch. I'm barely hanging on. Let me see. Give me 1 second. How long is this next chapter? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. All right, folks. Do you want me to read one more chapter? Give me some 1s in the chat if you want me to read one more chapter. Give me some 2s in the chat if you'd rather have us end right now. Let me know, and we will go from there. So yeah, give me some 1s if you want me to keep going and do one more chapter. Give me some 2s if you want us to end for the night. One more chapter. I'm seeing a lot of 1s. All right, I'm seeing a lot of 1s. Seeing a lot of 1s. All right. Sounds like everybody wants one more chapter, so we gonna give you guys one more chapter. Give me 1 second. I'm taking one more sip of this, and we gon' All right, folks. All right. And we're back. Got one more chapter to go, and then we'll end it for the night here. And we'll pick this back up again probably on Monday next week, or maybe Fridays. Well, I'll hold a vote on YouTube to see if we should do this every Friday, if you guys want this once a week. We'll see how it goes, because we can only do it for so long, right? Gennaro's secretary This chapter is titled Hammond. Gennaro's secretary bustled in with a new suitcase. It still had the sales tags on it. "You know, Mr. Gennaro," she said severely, "when you forget to pack it, it makes me think you really don't want to go on this trip." "Maybe you're right," Gennaro said. "I'm missing my kid's birthday." Saturday was Amanda's birthday, and Elizabeth had invited 20 screaming 4-year-olds to share it, as well as Cappy the clown and a magician. His wife hadn't been happy to hear that Gennaro was going out of town, and neither was their daughter Amanda. "Well, I did the best I could on short notice," his secretary said. There's running shoes at your size, and khaki shorts and shirts, and a shaving kit, a pair of jeans, and a sweatshirt if it gets cold. The car is downstairs to take you to the airport. You have to leave now, though, if you're going to make that flight." She left, and Gennaro walked down the hallway, tearing the sales tag off the suitcase. As he passed the all-glass conference room, Dan Ross left the table and came outside. "Have a good trip," Ross said. "But let's be very clear about one thing. I don't know how bad the situation actually is, Donald, but if there's a problem on that island, burn it to the ground." "Jesus, Dan, we're talking about a big investment here. Don't hesitate. Don't even think about it. Just do it. You hear me?" Gennaro nodded. "I hear you. But Hammond..." "Screw Hammond," Ross said. My boy," the familiar raspy voice said. "How have you been, my boy?" "Very well, sir," Gennaro replied. He leaned back in the padded leather chair of the Gulfstream II jet as it flew east toward the Rocky Mountains. "You never call me anymore," Hammond said reproachfully. "I've missed you, Donald. How is your lovely wife?" "She's fine. Elizabeth's fine. We have a little girl now." "Wonderful, wonderful. Children are such a delight. She'd get a kick out of our park in Costa Rica." "Oh, hold on. Hair in my face." Gennaro had forgotten how short Hammond was. As he sat in the chair, his feet didn't even touch the carpet. He swung his legs as he talked. There was a childlike quality to the man, even though Hammond must now be, 75, 76, something like that. He looked older than Gennaro remembered, but then Gennaro hadn't seen him for about 5 years. Hammond was flamboyant, a born showman, and back in 1983 he had had an elephant that he carried around him all the time in a little cage. The elephant was 9 inches high and a foot long and perfectly formed, except his tusks, which were stunted. Hammond took the elephant with him to fundraising meetings. Gennaro usually carried it into the room, the cage covered with a little blanket, like a tea cozy, and Hammond would give some usual speech about the prospects for developing what he called consumer biologicals. Then, at the dramatic moment, Hammond would whip away the blanket to reveal the elephant, and he would ask for money. The elephant was always a rousing success. Its tiny body, hardly bigger than a cat's, promised untold wonders to come from the laboratory of Norman Atherton, the Stanford geneticist who was Hammond's partner in this new venture. But as Hammond talked about the elephant, he left a great deal unsaid. For example, Hammond was starting a genetics company, but the tiny elephant's body hadn't been made by any genetic procedure. Atherton had simply taken a dwarf elephant embryo and raised it in an artificial womb with hormonal modifications. That in and of itself was quite an achievement, but nothing like what Hammond hinted had been done. Sorry. Also, Atherton hadn't been able to duplicate his miniature elephant, and he tried. For one thing, everybody who saw the elephant wanted one. Then, too, the elephant was prone to colds, particularly during the winter. The sneezes coming through the little trunk filled Hammond with dread, and sometimes the elephant would get his tusks. I thought it said he didn't grow his tusks. Oh, they're just stunted. Never mind. Get his tusks stuck between the bars of the cage and snort irritably as he tried to get free. Sometimes he got infections around the tusk line. Hammond always fretted that the elephant would die before Atherton could grow a replacement. Hammond also concealed from prospective investors that the fact that the elephant's behavior had changed substantially in the process of miniaturization. The little creature might look like an elephant, but he acted like a vicious rodent, quick-moving and mean-tempered. Hammond discouraged people from petting the elephant to avoid nipped fingers. Although Hammond spoke confidently of the $7 billion in annual revenue by 1993, his project was intensely speculative. Hammond had visions and enthusiasm, but there was no certainty that his plan would work at all, particularly since Norman Atherton, the brains behind the project, had terminal cancer, which is the final point Hammond had neglected to mention. Even so, with Gennaro's help, Hammond got his money. Between September of 1983 and November of 1985, John Alfred Hammond and his pachyderm portfolio raised $870 million in venture capital to finance his proposed corporation, International Genetic Technologies, Inc. And then they could have raised more, except Hammond insisted on absolute secrecy, and he offered no return on capital for at least 5 years. That scared a lot of investors off. In the end, they'd had to take mostly Japanese consortia. The Japanese were the only investors who had the patience. Sorry, pulling everything back up here. I don't know what's going on with my phone, but it's not liking this right now for whatever reason. I'm just trying to load up the chat here. Alright. Sitting in the leather chair of the jet, Gennaro thought about how evasive Hammond was. The old man was now ignoring the fact that Gennaro's law firms had forced this trip on him. Instead, Hammond behaved as if they were engaged in a purely social outing. "It's too bad you didn't bring your family with you, Donald," he said. Gennaro shrugged. "It's my daughter's birthday. 20 kids already scheduled. The cake and the clown. You know how it is." "Oh, I understand," Hammond said. "Kids set their heart on things." "Anyway, is the park ready for visitors?" Gennaro asked. "Well, not officially," Hammond said. "But the hotel is built, so there is a place to stay." "And the animals?" "Oh, of course. The animals are all there. All in their spaces." Gennaro nodded. "I remember in the original proposal you were hoping of a total for 12 animals. Oh, we're far beyond that, Donald. We've had 238 animals." 238? The old man giggled, pleased to hear Gennaro's reaction. "You can't imagine it. We have herds of them." 238. How many different species? 15 different species, Donald. That's incredible. That's fantastic. And what about all the other things you wanted? The facilities, the computers? All of it, Hammond said. Everything's on the island is state of the art. You'll see for yourself, Donald. It's all perfectly wonderful. That's why this concern is so misplaced. There's absolutely no problem with the island. Gennaro nodded again. Then there should be absolutely no problem with an inspection. And there isn't, Hammond said. But it slows things down. Everything has to stop for this official visit. You've had delays anyways. You postponed the opening. "Oh, that," Hammond said, tugging at the red silk handkerchief in the breast pocket of his sport coat. "It was bound to happen. Bound to happen." "Why?" "Well, Donald," Hammond said, "to explain that to you, you have to go back to the initial concept of the resort. The concept of the most advanced amusement park in the world, combining the latest electronical and biological technologies. I'm not talking about rides. Everyone has rides. Coney Island has rides, and these days everybody has animatronic environments. The haunted house, the pirate den, the Wild West, the earthquake. Everyone has those things. So we set out to make biological attractions, living attractions, so astounding that they would capture the imagination of the entire world." Gennaro had to smile. It was almost the same speech, word for word, that he had used on the investors so many years ago. And we can never forget the ultimate objective of the project in Costa Rica: to make money. Hammond said, staring out the window of the jet and smiling. Lots and lots of money. I remember, Gennaro said. And the secret to making money in a park, Hammond said, is to limit your personnel costs. The food handlers, ticket tellers, cleanup crews, repair teams, to make a park that runs with minimal staff. That is why we invested in all the computer technology. We automated wherever we could, I remember. But the plain fact is, Hammond said, when you put together all the animals and all the computer systems, you run into snags. Whoever got a major computer system up and running on schedule? Nobody I know. So you've just had another normal startup delay. Yes, that's right. Normal delays. I heard there were accidents during construction, Gennaro said. Some workmen died? Yes, there were several accidents, and a total of 3 deaths. 2 workmen died building the cliff road. 1 other died as a result of an earth mover accident in January. But we haven't had any accidents for months now. He put his hand on the younger man's arms. Donald, he said, believe me when I tell you, everything on the island is going forward as planned. Everything on that island is perfectly fine. The intercom clicked. The pilot said, seatbelts, please. We're landing in Choto. And that, folks, is the end of that chapter. Next time we pick this up, we will be starting with the Choto chapter. And that would be page 64 of Jurassic Park. At least if you have this variation, the page might be slightly different. And for you, depending on your version of the book. Spectre, holy cannoli, thank you so much for the dono. Much appreciated, Spectre. Guys, before we get off tonight, let's give some major W's for Spectre there. Thank you very much, and thank you. I hope I am able to inspire you, Spectre, and I hope that I can continue to do so as time goes on. That's the whole goal of this, is to inspire and teach people about dinosaurs in our fiction and our prehistoric world. And so I genuinely cannot thank each and every one of you enough. I hope that everybody had a fantastic night and had a great time joining me as we began to read this book. This is just the first part, so make sure to tune in next time for the second part of this, and make sure to stay tuned, because after we finish this book, if everybody enjoyed this well enough, we'll start the next one after. So until then, you folks make sure you have a fantastic night. Remember to be good people, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Oh, and once again, before we get off, make sure let's give some extra W's for Spectator and everyone else who donated tonight. Spectator, Taldoz, and Brandon. Give me some W's for everyone who donated. I appreciate you guys so very much. And make sure you all have a fantastic night.
What's up, brother?
What up, brother? Not shit.
What's up, brother?
What's up, brother?
Okay, I just wanted to come back and say one last big shout out to both Spectre and Paleo Analysis. Paleo, thank you so very much for sending a couple bucks over. I highly appreciate it. And Spectre, once again, thank you for sending some extra cash. Like, holy crap. Especially as the live is ending. I appreciate you guys so very much. And also, if you guys haven't seen it before, make sure you check out Paleo Analysis before as well. Big shout out to both Spectre and Paleo Analysis. Paleo, thank you so very much. Paleo is a amazing guy. Sorry, I realize you guys can probably hear my other my thing there too. But Paleo is an amazing guy, and I highly appreciate him. And he's made some fantastic content. If you want some great education content, make sure you check out Paleo Analysis as well. All right, folks. Thank you all so very much. Paleo, Spectre, thank you guys once again for those last-minute donos. And you all have a fantastic night.